So the yellow, I think, is like the first.
You do anything, or you good?
No, you can go right in. Sorry. Sausage. Thanks. 6, 8, 4.
So we'll make sure that.
Yeah, he's gonna text me when he's calling in. Trying to get on, trying to get.
I'm gonna make a note that that's.
He's gonna come in.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Director, I think he is gonna call.
Okay, so it's just everybody for your awareness. The one item regarding the investment advisory services are its submissions. That is only set to be scheduled around 6 o'clock. So depending on where we are, we may have to rearrange the agenda to accommodate our guests here. So with that, let's get started here. Welcome everyone to the Administration and Public Works Committee meeting for Tuesday, September 5th. And it is 5:34, so we're going to get started here. I want to welcome everyone here in the room. And first item on the agenda is a roll call. Michelle.
Evening, Council Chair, Council Member Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Clark is absent.
Here.
Councilmember-
Online.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Eden. Here. Councilmember Nian. Here. Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Here.
Councilmember Jaxie.
Here.
Councilmember Hopper.
Here. Okay, so we'll have next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of August 8th, 2023. So if I can get a motion for approval of the minutes made by Councilmember Joe Farmer, second. Made by Councilmember Jaxie. Any questions, comments, discussion on the minutes? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Okay, anyone oppose or abstain?
Abstain.
An abstention, Councilmember Hopper. So moving on, we're going to go into public participation. So I acknowledge we have one member of the public here in the room and our officer here. So public participation again is an opportunity to provide comment to the committee, and the rules are the same for public participation. Here's we ask you to keep them for 5 minutes. So Michelle, do you have any speaker cards?
I do. I have one. I have Tony Salvatore.
All right, Mr. Salvatore, welcome to the meeting, and just again, just routine, state your name and address or ward. And
Just go ahead and sit down. I think I feel more comfortable here.
okay,
Yeah, my name is Tony Salvatore, Ward 2. I'm here to talk about City of Wildwood trash pickup. And what a fiasco. You guys really, that's a boondoggle. But I'll need more than 5 minutes. Give me 6 minutes because this is very important. It may decide if you guys get a class action lawsuit or not. Okay?
to be fair, so we're gonna keep it at 5 minutes.
That's fine. Okay, April 30th, 2019, Wildwood enters into a 5-year contract with Waste Connections for trash pickup. Contract goes for 2 years with 3 yearly options. January 3rd, 2023, the same committee right here, Administration Public Works Committee, passed a motion to prepare an RFP for solid waste and recycling. So it already told Waste Connections, we're not going to deal with you. January 27th, 2023, Waste Connections sends an email declining the 5th year option, but open to negotiations. March 2nd, 2023. Wildwood waits till March 2nd, 2023 to publish the only RFP for trash pickup, which was going to start on August 1st. The RFP had numerous penalty clauses that were very subjective and would have cost millions of dollars to the trash contractors. I've talked to some of the providers, and they said they couldn't touch that because of the onerous, terrible monetary clauses, penalties that were in the RFP. The RFP due date was March 3rd, 31st, 2023. On March 27, 2023, the RFP was modified and closed on April 3rd, 2023 at 1600. April 2nd, 2023, Meridian Waste submits a bid for all of Wildwood. The bid was for $29 for trash and recycling for all of Wildwood. And it also included a 15% reduction for seniors. April 14th, an email sent rejecting all bids. There was only one. The email was sent by Rick Brown and Thomas Lee to Meridian, to Waste Connections. It was sent to Republic, and it was sent to Gateway. Now, there was only one bid, but it was sent to all of them. There was no other bid. There were no other RFPs after April 3rd. And the RFP states any bid after 4 o'clock on April 3rd wouldn't even be opened, and it would be sent back to the sender, unopened. And I reiterate, prior to April 14th, Mr. Asciutto from Meridian gets a call from the city of Wildwood. The call is on record, he still has it, and we will get it. And it indicated that we are going to send you a rejection letter on April 14th, but it's really not a rejection letter. It allows us to go outside of the RFP and negotiate with you on our terms, not through the RFP. So we will go ahead. He said they actually mentioned we'll use the emergency clause. There in your ordinance here. So this was prior to April 14th. Now, if you were going to reject someone, why don't you go back out with an RFP and you ask them what caused you not to give us these bids? It was all those penalties that were in the RFP. April 26th, Republic Services submits a proposal Wildwood for part of Wildwood trash pickup, but no RFP was published by Wildwood. RFP, those of you listening in, it stands for Request for Proposals or for bids. Emails indicate the city of Wildwood reached out to Republic Services and worked with them for a no bid contract. There was no RFP. This is $42,200,000 for a 5-year contract.
30 seconds.
Okay, April 27th, Gateway Disposal submits proposal for part of Wildwood trash pickup, but no RFP published for Wildwood. Emails indicate the city of Wildwood reached out to Gateway Services and worked with them for a no bid contract. You all went to closed session illegally. Sunshine Law does not allow you to go into closed session to talk about these contracts because they were for all of Wildwood. All the residents are paying for this. Anyway, you should probably go ahead and read 610.021 and 610.022. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you.
It's obvious you guys don't want to hear the truth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, and let's just check. Do we have any comments online over Zoom or anyone attending?
No, sir.
Okay, no one on Zoom. Okay, all right, well, that looks like then that concludes public participations. We'll move on to the next part of the agenda. We'll move into administration under for information. The first item is the update on the elevator repair. So I'll hand it over to the city administrator.
Thank you, Chair Garitano. So on Friday, August 18th, TK Elevator actually came to City Hall and removed the elevator's controller drive. The elevator's been out since February. The city did go through an RFP process. Originally, the city was quoted at $63,000 for this repair. And now it came down through the RFP process to $53,061. In this case, the city did reach out to our insurance carrier, Chubb, to see if this was a claim that was coverable, considering the fact that the elevator stopped working during a power outage with Ameren working on a box down on near Schnucks. And in this case, they did received the fact that, yes, that is a coverable item, but we needed to prove it. So main thing is they were here on site on August 18th. That being said, they were unable to run the proper tests they need to do to confirm it and write that insurance claim check. So they will be back when the controller drive is being reinstalled to run additional testing. That being said, they said that should be around in the next month. The elevator should be back up and operational. So we'll have updates there. Just wanted to give you a small little update while we're waiting for the elevator to be put back together. In that case, the department's available for any questions at this time.
Okay, open it up, see if there's any questions or comments on the elevator repair. Councilmember Joe Plum.
So is this one of those things where like we pay for it and then they pay us back?
So it'd be in, good question, Councilor Farmer. So in this case, insurance claim is approved. They would reimburse us. Our deductible is only 5,000. So out of the 53, it would be roughly around 47.
Anyone else have any questions?
Reese is going.
All right. Councilmember Clark?
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I had three questions. One is, when we look at this, have we set up like a standard operating procedure, SOPs for preventing this from coming to a problem like this again, having periodic preventive measures set up, just our PM plan for addressing anything that could happen in the future with the elevator, as for example, and whether it's oiling the joints or whatever it is, to make sure that we keep it in good repair. The second question, I'll ask them all since I'm on Zoom. The second question is, what is the anticipated timing from the insurance company? And third question is, in the overview, you stated that the controller drive was damaged beyond repair in the first paragraph. And then later you said Schindler was to repair the controller drive. So did they change their mind that it wasn't beyond repair?
And may I speak to this? Okay, thank you, Councilmember Clark. In that case, I'd like to answer that one first. That was a figure of speech. I do apologize for the not having literal wording there. So it was never beyond repair. It was kind of a little bit of a metaphor there. In this case, though, it is going to be repaired. Unfortunately, with how this elevator system works, is that all of it is proprietary data. So in this case, Schindler is the one that actually has to make the repair when TK Elevator is the one installing and taking it out, all of that. But in this case, Schindler used to be our maintenance contractor for our elevator. They did not respond to the proposal, and they have, after a couple different times of reaching out, kind of cut to the chase. But in this case as well, TK Elevator is on contract right now as our service elevator maintenance provider. So they do come out probably about 3 or 4 times a year and just run traditional tests, do the lubing of the joints that you were just discussing. They do those items, but in this case, it was just such a bad power outage that they believed that it just fried the system when it came through. And there were 2 power outages that day, which typically doesn't happen, but in this case, we can look into it further to see if they can put together some kind of plan to protect that box.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
And the other question was, what is the anticipated timing for the insurance company to get back with us?
So the insurance company will be back on site when they're reinstalling the controller drive, and they'll be running additional testing just to confirm that it was in fact the power outage that caused the issue. And that's expected to be done in the next 3 weeks.
Any other questions or comments, Councilmember Clark?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, seeing no other hands up in the room, we're moving on to the next topic here, which is the update on the new phone system.
Thank you, Chair. So as you all know, the city did recently approve a new phone system, a cloud-based phone system be installed. And I did want to note that the date says August 5th on there. I do apologize, I should say September. In this case, though, as well, IT Voice has had its preliminary meeting with staff regarding this transition, and we've discussed the migration from Windstream specifically is one of the big problems here, not problems, but one of the challenges you have to get over is that while we're still, running that dial tone through Windstream, they have to migrate all those phone numbers to keep our same number. So we are providing that information to them now, extensions, and we're also creating the interactive voicemail that people will go to when they call in. But this is going to provide a much better experience for not only, staff, council members, mayor, all that, but also our residents. We'll be able to, change our voicemail greeting more frequently. We'll be able to do it without getting the input from IT Voice. So we are looking forward to that. And we're expecting to have this new phone system implemented, installed, and completely active by October 10th, 2023. And that case, your voicemail to email functionality will return. So we are just making strides there. First meeting's out of the way. We're working on some paperwork, but the city is going to then move, once we have tested and we feel very confident that the system is running properly, then we will then go ahead and cancel our subscription to Windstream, and then that'll start saving us the around $500 per month. So good things all around, saving some money while also getting some added functionality and getting some better phones that are a little bit more reliable. Just to give you guys a heads up, the system we have now is over 15 years old, and it no longer has the parts that are in it. If something gets broken, fries out, they just can't replace it. They do have a couple. They have one chip left in stock for this current model. And in that case, we used one of those back in February. So, that was actually what fried, and that had all our licenses on it for the email to voicemail functionality, which kind of started this whole train. So we're excited. Once that's active, we'll be sure to reach out to the city council, let them know what their, how they can, well, actually, you'll just start receiving voicemails in your email. That'll be your sign. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. October 10th is the date circled, and we look forward to saving some money while offering a better, more interactive experience for our residents. Thank you.
All right, anyone have anything for this topic here regarding the phone system? Great, I don't see anyone's hands up, so I think that one's clear, and so we'll move on. Number 3, the update on neglected property in the town center.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I did pass out, this is a hard copy, to ensure that we're not pointing fingers in public at specific businesses and saying, hey, this is what's wrong. We did pass out to each one of the committee members. Our Department of Planning and our code enforcement team had made some drives in the town center area to just take a look and see what items had not been updated, which things were a little bit out of not necessarily up to, let's just say that. In this case, this is a pretty preliminary notation of what we're looking to hopefully enforce here soon. And on top of that as well, these will also be presented to the city council, but in general, this is just an overview of what was observed while visiting each of these locations. And we do look forward to following up and hopefully making these improvements for them very soon. But I would like to note that, once the city, cites or provides a notice, once that citation's made, it does move on to the court system. So in that case, the prosecuting attorney takes it over and the judge then makes its verdict. So after that point, we no longer really have as much information and control, but we'd be more than happy, if legally fine, to reach out to the judge to get additional information here on that process once it gets into their hands. But in this case, this will also be presented to the city council at next week's meeting. Would be more than happy to answer any questions at this point about the items that were observed.
Any questions or comments? Councilmember Eden?
Yeah, just my understanding is what triggered this was for complaints and a council member's concerns. Had that not happened, would we have had any sort of scheduled inspection for the area? If not, is that something we're gonna add, do every, quarter kind of thing
Yes.
proactively?
So in this case, and Ricky, it's just do this. You wanna speak to it? Yes, yeah, we're doing, you can speak to that and then I'll speak. to
I guess it's also on the agenda elsewhere, but from Public Works perspective, we have generally tried to make an effort this time of year because of Celebrate Wildwood to bring things up to snuff essentially. So if there was obvious things that we hadn't gotten to or hadn't gotten to the top of our to-do list, we usually have made an attempt to take care of them and make sure they were done by the end of the summer. And so that's kind of an annual thing that we've tried to do. Relative to town center and the streets in and around where the Celebrate Wildwood to be held. So along those same lines, we're starting to do that same process this year, trying to get obvious things addressed best that we can. One thing I would note, and a lot of people aren't really aware of the confines of the CID, the Community Improvement District, but most of the area around City Hall, basically north of Main, south of 100, west, east of Market, west of Taylor, that whole area. A lot of those areas, those landscaping, the lights, it's all CID maintenance. It's not technically Public Works responsibility. The sidewalks are included in that, the medians included that. So it's always been a little bit of a gray area in terms of who's responsible, and doesn't come out of my budget, frankly, it comes out of the CID budget. So I would admit there probably is some degree of area or lack of accountability, maybe relative to the landscaping and how much effort should be put into it. A lot of that landscaping is getting very old, probably could use some effort to be rejuvenated, replanted, that kind of thing. But again, it comes out of the CID budget. It doesn't come out of the city's budget directly. So there's always a little bit of, should we do it? Is it in our responsibility to do it? It's not really in Public Works directly to take on those kind of things. So I think that's an important aspect that needs to be noted. Let me keep going.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, thanks, Rick. And then on the other side of it, with the more code enforcement side, so, Rick was just speaking more to what's our responsibility in town center. Kind of shifting gears there with this code enforcement side, it's more so what are the businesses responsible for? So just to kind of give an example of what's a pretty good example of taking care of the land. I know the landscaping is, Milk and Honey and Fox Company Yoga's over there now too, and Benedetto's. They typically do a pretty good job, and we don't really have to even do too much there and help. But in many cases, they're leading into Celebrate Wildwood, it is kind of that time where we kind of tidy up and take a look around and take that breath of fresh air. So yes, typically around this time of year is when we're going out and looking at the town center in general as well.
So just to also put this on your radar, because people are driving, really either 109 or Clayton to get to Celebrate Wildwood and connect, or coming up Manchester and then getting to Celebrate Wildwood through 100. If I hadn't seen the county's vehicles and mowing equipment that same day, I would have let you guys know. I know they've had budget cuts and they have mowed less frequently, but they started doing it again on Clayton, where they're just mowing less frequently, and the weeds were above 2 feet tall. So I would imagine that they will need another friendly reminder before the end of the summer, since our growing seasons are hotter and longer, to mow more frequently, because I mean, it was over the sidewalks in some areas where I was walking, and I've checked it, later they have mowed, but they can't, more than 2 feet is excessive by our own codes and theirs.
I would agree with that.
Just keep it on the radar.
We can check in with that for sure.
I don't see any other hands up, so I'll make a comment on this. First of all, thank you very much for putting together this information here, because our residents have been bringing it up, both, face-to-face conversations, you see it even online, comments about the appearance of the town center. And while the city is 68 square miles, the town center only represents 2%. I was going to say 1.8% exactly out of the whole city, but it gets the most visibility because it has the center of all our businesses over here. People are driving through here. We're at the crossroads of 100 and 109. And so a lot of times, people will come into Taylor Road. It's like coming through the front door of Wildwood, just like people come to see us at City Hall. So it is really good to see this here. And, I think it's probably, you all have your processes in place as to how you approach it. But I would imagine, just from my personal experience, that good majority probably will address it. They just need to be made aware of it. And, we want to portray that image that we are partnering in a good, friendly way to say, hey, help us keep our town center clean and orderly. Because the fact is that, you know, if people come into a town center that's nice and clean, it sends a message, which the opposite also occurs. If you come into a town center and it's messy, or things don't look good, or there's weeds growing out of control, sends a different message that I don't think anyone here or our residents would agree, right? That we don't care about our home, and we want to send a message that's the opposite. So I would hope, and I think that a lot of these folks, I mean, I'm you know, the list is quite long here. I'm surprised to see there's quite a bit, but it just means that, you know, things do need to be tidied up here. You know, so I appreciate that you're making this effort here. Would love to get periodic updates on our progress here so that we can feel like we're making an accomplishment, you know, as we're checking off items on the list here. And then, you know, for those that for some reason either have been made aware, and I know there's a couple here when I look at this that are definitely been made aware that, you know, they're not cutting the grass, the building's sitting vacant. You know, obviously we've exhausted all the possible ways in partnering, and then ultimately the court we have to hope that the court then does its work there to address it. That's number 9.
In general, when new businesses come into town center, or maybe some that have been here for a long time and maybe have changed over, or maybe new managers or whoever is responsible for doing some of these things, are they made aware at the beginning, or maybe like once a year, hey, here's just a reminder of what we require? In other words, not having to go after them when they've already done something wrong, but maybe just reminders and updates as to these are our expectations, because like you said, they might not even know some of the things that they're doing incorrectly. I was gonna disagree. Okay.
But can I add something, Joe? So yeah, so I would suggest maybe along those lines, I mean, I think it's great that we've got tenants like Milk and Honey and Fox Creek that are doing this, but I'm very sure that in most of these leases, the business owners are not responsible for any part of what is on these pieces of paper. So reaching out to them and letting them know what is needed is great. It's not their responsibility, nor are they able, I'm sure, to fund a significant portion of these repairs. So one of the things I might suggest that we look at, you know, whether that be tonight or a different meeting down the road is, you know, what other additional tools do we need to provide to you guys to help ensure that these things are happening? Because some of these lists for some of these buildings are pretty extensive, and like whether you're an out-of-state owner that owns the building or a local business here, whatever. I mean, if you have 5 or 6 pretty significant items that need to be fixed, that's a big chunk of money. So letting somebody know once a year, hey, by the way, you've got $10,000 to $15,000 worth of repairs that are not necessary is maybe not the most helpful thing in the world to do. So kind of an ongoing thing like this. And also, you know, having some type of tracking, I think would be helpful, because I mean, there are, as Councilmember Garritano said, there are a few names on this list that are not in direct town center proper, but are near enough by that are clearly ongoing process. So whether that be our court system or tools that we can give to you guys, or relook at ordinances or whatever it is to try to motivate these people that own property that are neglecting it in the middle of the city where we all frequent, that is kind of what we do here. So what can we do to help you guys do this better?
Well, in this case, I did want to note, first and foremost, for new businesses, yes, that's part of the main job is to, when they get on board and when we meet with them, they ask those kind of questions, but we also walk them through what is expected depending on where they're at. So that for new businesses, yes. For standard updates, that I will say has not been occurring. Obviously, we notice something, we do reach out to them, but it's more so not as proactive, like, hey, here are our codes, just a friendly reminder. I think that's a great idea and it could be done. When it comes to additional tools, I would have to consult with the city attorney, because I know he did say there's a certain limit to, it's why we have the general provision under our code for what penalties can be. So there is that piece, but another item I did want to talk about was when I did discuss with the planning department, obviously oversees code enforcement here. And they had said that we did kind of try to go after some of these, repeat offenders back around COVID, and COVID was kind of hitting hard. And supposedly there was kind of a sentiment at that time that maybe we shouldn't be pushing the gas too hard on these businesses right now because it was, it was tough times. So I know this isn't a for action item, but just to kind of get a general reading of the mood, I would say, that tone has obviously should have changed at this point. So we're going back to, let's put the gas to the, put the floor to the metal here.
Yeah, and I mean, I mean, a lot of people, I try to think about this like with my kids. Sometimes it's easier to have 100 different conversations with them about a topic than one very difficult one. So if it's an ongoing conversation and one of these properties in here is actively for sale, at least one of them. And so I'm sure Councilmember Ryan can attest to this. Sometimes when properties are for sale, people selling them really don't care about keeping them up. And those things are just, it's not gonna help sell the building. It's also not gonna give us a good look. So I just think having the ability to track these conversations, just letting people know, hey, this is what it is. I mean, many people forget to cut the grass or cut a dead branch or whatever it is. A number of these on here are like pretty egregious things. This is not like your weeds are a little bit much. So, this is, my worry is if you're not reminding these people frequently, they don't care because a lot of these buildings are owned by out-of-state REITs. It's just an investment. They don't, until you tell them they have to do it, they're not going to do it. So we just got to be on top of them all the time.
Councilmember Hughes.
I sat through a Missouri Municipal League lecture at the general conference last year. And I was alarmed and concerned about the topic because I didn't know if we were doing this as a city, and this is meant to be rhetorical and not to be answered out loud. Are we doing administrative warrants for code enforcement? Because the entire lecture was on how many communities are not. But boy, you really need to. And the communities that have to all the time are ones where they have dealt with like essentially blighted properties. So the owner has refused to mow, or the property owner has, and then the city is going in and doing that. But would they spend an hour talking to us about how to even ring the doorbell or to enter the business to hand the code violation to them? You even should have a warrant for that because it only takes one person to get really hateful. And I think we try to run things like a friendly community in general, and we try to run things, neighbor to neighbor or friend to friend in our business community. And that will work for years until it doesn't. And so if we're not doing that practice, maybe we need to talk to our judge about that. It's an administrative process. It's basically a stack of papers that a judge signs off on as part of a routine in bulk. And that would be a conversation for you guys and John Young to have.
Councilmember Hopper.
I'm gonna pull a few things from all of this because everything is great ideas. I think ultimately it all just needs to be spelled out in a process and say, this is how often we're gonna review. This is, this is how we inform you up front. This is when you get a violation. This is the schedule of violations. At what point do we involve the court? I think it just needs to be very clear cut and spelled out. And so, yes, anytime somebody would come in with a new business, they could say, here's what we expect, and this is what it's gonna look like. But I think to Councilmember Farmer's point, I think almost having a bit of a, at least a running inventory or list of saying, okay, this is owner operated. This is just somebody leasing a building. And they're just like, if you rent an apartment, you don't do the yard work and you don't repair the sidewalks and you don't do any of that. The property owners do that. And odds are the property owners are a larger investment firm. And I think taking into consideration, there's a little bit of a different tactic that you're going to take from a mom and pop shop who's doing the best they can. And we're like, it'd be great if you could clean this up, and we give them a little more leniency versus you make billions of dollars a year, come fix your sidewalks. Like, it's just, there's just no question around that. So I think having an inventory of that and then having a very clear cut spelled out process that is delivered to everyone. And then so here you go.
Yeah, great discussion on that. Love the ideas, and I think the sentiment is, unique, not unique, but I mean, it's agreed upon everyone in here that we care about our city. We want it to look good, just like how I'm sure all of you work hard to keep your home looking good so that, your visitors and those that drive by look at your home and see what a good example it is. But the other thing too, and this is a little bit off topic, so forgive me for that. No, I mean, the topic is the same, but I know this is a list about business names, but it also starts at home, right? And so even looking at City Hall, we need to make sure that we're setting the example too for the community to say, that if we're going to hold others accountable, we have to hold ourselves accountable. And I think there's even some good opportunities just around this building that, especially given its age, it's starting to look like that. So I'm sure the city administrator is probably thinking about ideas around that. But that might help tee up the conversation too, because I think we do have to look at that. And I think, so the points that are made here, I think one of the things, and I appreciate Rick that, Celebrate Wildwood's definitely one of those times where we look to tidy up things. But I think there has to be that cadence, whether it's quarterly or something like that, so that, we're not always reacting to things, but we're being proactive and just making sure things are being maintained the right way. So.
You and I know this was, do you mind if I speak, Chair? Thank you. I know this wasn't a for action item, but something we can do. I know it's not for action, but just we could put together, I think that's a good idea, having a clear cut process. And by next month, I know this will be the next item, even though I'll get to that in a second, but next item we'll be discussing the MyGov piece. And that should be, we should have good data on what was requested in 30 days. So at the next meeting, that should be presented, and that'll be helpful because that can send automatic emails out. That can do a lot of things that, doesn't take the man time that, would typically take in this case, and also show a track. Literally we reached out to them then, they didn't respond, or they did respond, whatever that might be. So that'll be great information to have. I do know that, we don't want to be putting out specific individuals' names and stuff like that, but we can have a high level understanding of here are the most common issues that we're seeing out there. And here are, here's the process. So I think that clear cut piece, we can have that just go hand in hand with the data that comes in, and hopefully have that right in front of you for next month.
All right, you want
There
to,
is a flow chart on the website.
Yeah,
It probably needs a little touching up.
I was looking at that. I actually wrote it out. Sorry.
you want to just segue right into that next topic?
Well,
there?
I was gonna actually say, and I wasn't trying to be rude, but the Mr. Sauce, he had reached out to me and said he was having trouble with Zoom, but he said that I could give him a call. I know
Okay.
that's not ideal here, but
We'll
with
pause
that-
for a second and see if you can call.
yeah,
maybe
I know
figure
that's
it out, maybe
kind of
you can
awkward, but
I'm gonna go ahead and put a motion on the floor to rearrange the agenda to move that item up.
yeah, that would
we
need to be done.
need that. So, motion made by Councilmember Eden, seconded by Councilmember Jaxi to rearrange the order of the agenda so that the next item for discussion review of the investment advisory services RFP submissions, and then after that item, we will resume where we left off. So with that motion on the floor, procedurally, all those in favor, please say aye. Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, that motion passes. So we're going to just pause for a moment while the city administrator with the phone call here to get the Zoom set up.
Hey, David, this is Thomas Lee, and we're in the middle of committee, but I was gonna put you on speaker. I know you had some trouble with Zoom, so we'll put you on speaker here, and I'll make a quick note. Thank you. This is Mr. Saucier. He is now actually the Director of Investments for the state. And thank you so much, David, for joining us. He was kind enough to do a review of the submissions of the RFPs for no cost to the city. So this was a really great thing for him to do. And I know that the committee members here are just as grateful as I am for your help here, have a fresh set of eyes, look at all of this and come from an outside perspective. In front of you guys all today, you have a copy of Mr. Sauce's recommendation and a summary of the RFPs that were submitted. And then also you have, that was passed out today in this meeting, the two follow-up questions that were brought to the attention of the committee last month. Those were sent out to each of the firms that submitted an RFP. And in this case, this was the responses that we got back. We did not get one back from Maloney Securities. So we tried to give them as much time as possible. That's why it wasn't posted. We gave them to the end of the day today, because we only had 2 last week. So we just wanted to make sure they had as much time as possible. So you have 4 here now. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Sauce to, give a little brief introduction about himself and answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all. Sorry I can't be there in person or at least virtually, but it was a nice opportunity to kind of step forward and work with Tom and Don and kind of go through the RFPs and the proposal that you guys had put together and reached out to 5 responses. I didn't take the opportunity to kind of walk through each of them step by step. As you guys are probably aware and discussed at your last meeting, there's definitely pros and cons to each one. But we can kind of go step through them and on what level of detail you would like to get to. But just a kind of little brief background on me, just earlier this summer, I moved over from the Missouri State Employees Retirement System, where I was involved in managing their cash portfolio, in addition to building out their externally managed real estate portfolio, to now the director of investments for the state treasurer's office. So I've been kind of spending the last 2 months or so learning as much as I could from Bruce Ring, who just retired last week after serving as director for the last 13 years. I have had the opportunity to evaluate numerous RFPs or proposals over the years, both at Mosier's and on a personal level with regards to some involvement in different charitable organizations here in the Jefferson City area. So if there's any questions that you have about myself or my role with the state at the treasurer's office or my experience, please here. This is an opportunity to kind of discuss whatever you all want to.
Hey, thank you so much for being with us today. So I'll open up to see if anyone has questions here. You have the information provided to you, and would open it up to see if anyone has anything.
That would be great. Unfortunately, I can barely hear you. So if
I'll
there are any
repeat,
questions, Tom, do you mind just
Yeah,
repeating them?
yep, Mr. Sauce, I will definitely repeat any questions that
Okay,
come through.
thank you.
Okay, so we've got 2 speakers here in the room, Councilmember Edens and Councilmember Clark. So the city administrator will repeat what it asked or said.
Firstly, would you please thank him and tell him that this tremendously helped us, because many of us have degrees and things that our applicable skill set didn't cross over. So if you'd start with that.
Yes, Miss Edens, our council member here, just said she wanted to thank you so much on the behalf of the entire committee and the city for doing this. Not everyone here in the, on the committee, we all have degrees and we have specialties, but this was one that was a little bit out of our wheelhouse. So having your expertise in this arena really did help with the entire situation and help identify what would be the best foot forward for the city.
Okay, you're more than welcome. I think projects like this are a team effort, and everybody brings different skills and experiences to the table. So I'm happy that I could kind of contribute a little bit to this discussion.
Okay, thank you. And my understanding from your report, which was again tremendously helpful, is that we did walk away with a good option. I just want to clarify that you did feel like you were able to make a strong recommendation, or did you feel like you were picking the best of bad options and we need to go back out to fish?
So, Mr. Sauce, what Councilmember Edens alluded to here was that from your recommendation, the Columbia Capital as the investment manager and obviously the Commerce as the custodian, did you feel as if that is a great foot forward for the city? That is a great option and very confident in that feeling and we should do that? Or is it more so this was just the best option of a bin of not so great options? That was the question. So is there maybe a better direction that might be outside of the proposals that were submitted? Did I get that?
I think you guys are taking a step in the right direction. The first step being just putting together this proposal and kind of reaching out to, I don't know how many you actually sent the initial proposal to, but the RFP itself was very thorough. I mean, I think you guys covered a lot of basics there, understanding what you're looking for, you know, where you want to be down the road. Based on Columbia's response and experience, especially their experience is what continues to catch my attention and eye as I, you know, read through their responses. They're not just their broad experience, but their government specific experience of working with entities or organizations like you all, I think is very eye-opening to benefit you guys, you know, down the road. After I reviewed the proposals and made my recommendation, I did talk to Bruce, and he's, you know, longstanding experience in this area as well. And he kind of seconded my recommendation with Columbia. There were a couple on the list that he wasn't very familiar with. And kind of, I went through kind of what my thought process was. And I think Columbia Capital provides you the experience, the government experience, the team effort. I mean, they have experience. They have a location in Kansas City and St. Louis, so it's kind of a local team that you all would be working with. It's a smaller operation, so you're going to get that small scale, small client focus. A couple of the other responses, I don't think they kind of took the time to really understand who the city of Wildwood is and what they're looking for. It was more of a copy and paste from prior responses. And then you have Commerce, which is a much larger organization, the largest of the five. And I think they're a good option as well. You have that existing relationship with them. But I think if you drill down into the team, the experience that these different management firms bring to the table, that I am strongly confident and feel very optimistic for you all if you were to move forward with Columbia.
And just one more quick question. So what was the reason, can you elaborate a bit more on separating the custodial service and the advisor? Because unless I remember incorrectly or misunderstood, Columbia could also offer custodial services.
So what counts? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if it was because he was referencing the fact that we already had an existing relationship, which maybe we're happy with, maybe we're not.
Yeah, so she was asking specifically, was there a specific reason why you differentiated between the actual advisor recommendation, which would be Columbia Capital, and the actual custodian that would hold the money, which would be Commerce Bank? So she also offered, is it more so just that Commerce, we have that existing relationship, our money is held at that bank currently? Or was there something different there? Is there just the reasoning behind the distinction?
Yeah, it's my understanding with Columbia and several other of the management firms that they would outsource their custodial services, whether that's Schwab, Central Trust, Commerce, they're all custodial operations or custodians that, you know, with Capital, I know actually in their response, I was just looking at it as I was waiting for Tom's call, they suggested Schwab, which Schwab does not land on the state of Missouri's approved custodial services firms because they are not a bank. So we would need to reach out to Capital or Columbia Capital and discuss that. But I think Commerce and Central, and I'd have to verify, but I believe Commerce and Central Trust, of those 5 responses, those are the only 2 operations that are able to provide both asset management services and the custodial services. So to your point that I did recommend, without knowing how your relationship has been with Commerce Trust over the years, I just kind of recommended them. They are on our list. They're approved custodial service provider for the state of Missouri, and kind of leave it up to you all. If you think it's a good relationship, then I would continue to move forward with them. It would make the transition to an outsourced asset management firm smoother. But also if you've had some difficult times with Commerce over the year for the custodial services, now is the time to, of course, have that conversation in addition to the asset management services.
Thank you, David. Did that answer your question sufficiently here?
It does. I mean, my general understanding is that the concerns that we had was in relation to the management advising decisions that they were making rather than holding of the funds.
If you don't mind, Chair, if I could speak to that a little bit, I will say that, maybe not necessarily the advisement portion, but I will say as a bank, they are a very reputable, bank. And if we hit hard times in our country, and just speaking with other city administrators and other cities in our area, the 99% of them, well, not 99, but 90% of them typically use Commerce as their custodian to hold their money. And you just have a little bit more of the security. That's really the key here. Even, profitability is only a very small part of what this is. You really want to find not only, a company that understands our limited avenues of investment, but also can make sure that the custodian is someone that can really withstand the tough times if they were to come, because, as a city, we just could not afford to have our money go to the wind, obviously with the banking issues that we've seen in California in this year, it does make you think, you really want to hit home on what's been working and what is a consistent, nail in the coffin of good things. But yeah, sorry about that.
Any additional questions?
I think,
Councilmember Clark, Councilmember Garitano had to step out, so I will give you the floor.
Thank you. I just wondered if you could give a brief synopsis of a little of what you have handed out there that I don't have available to know what's on the handout.
yes, thank you. So in this case, David, this is more geared towards me. So these were two questions that the committee came up with. I also sent out an email to the committee not too long ago, and we had a deadline on it so we can make sure to get it to the hands of the individuals as soon as possible. But the two questions that were asked were, in your opinion, are there any questions that were not included on the RFP that we should have asked? Or are there any important follow-up questions that we should have asked? So that's question number one. Question number two was, are there per transaction fees in addition to the overall advisory fee? What about a custodian fee? If so, how can we determine what those would be? And in this case, Acropolis, Central Trust, Columbia Capital, and Commerce Trust all submitted responses. Unfortunately, Maloney Securities did not. Same goes for the second question. And to go over it real quickly, brief synopsis. Acropolis, pretty much said, hey, your RFP was broad and asked many relevant questions. They're really, they expressed that the RFPs are generally pretty difficult to express, all the things that you would want to do like in person. And on top of that, they really hit on the fact that their portfolios are custom designs to meet individual particular needs, pretty much stating that if they were given the time to speak with individuals, specifically the city staff, about what's currently in the accounts and what we're trying to do and what our goals are, they could make a better concerted effort towards meeting our individual needs. With Central Trust, they came out and said, they're welcome to an opportunity to meet, to discuss. This is pretty much the same thing, set the objectives and the goals for what you want to do with the capital, gather any additional needed information on the capital return needs, the constraints or the requirements that we have as a city. So that in a sense does show that they maybe didn't read the model investment piece, but then provide our analysis and their thoughts on that, and then also develop an update to the actual proposal they said they could do from a meeting. And that being said too, they kind of added some individual, just data on the flat. They have a flat fees of 0.2% of managed asset total, the money market paying 5.24% with FDI. They're just very minute and specific instances that they provided. On top of that, Columbia Capital, moved over, and they really broke down individual pieces. They got into the impact of municipal bonds, and they explained the importance of those and how this could work with us. They explained the depth of public funds expertise in Missouri, and they specifically said that the Missouri does not have a specific public funds investment statute, and then that it creates uncertainty with respect to what investments are actually permitted under state law, because it's a model investment policy, and the key word there is model, and that's coming from me, not them. But the model side is you should follow this, and if things were to go bad, it's better that you follow it. On top of that too, they just kind of went over the flexibility to conforming to our needs. So just pretty much let's get a meeting down and we would be able to discuss and get a better proposal out to you. And then Commerce, they came back and said, broadly speaking, they like the RFP. They think it was very well written, and it hit the topics that were critically important. The piece here that, I did like this piece of what they provided was the investment policy consulting. So, they said it's worth exploring the ability to revise or modify current investment policy. And by the way, we didn't give them the new updated state investment policy. It was our one that's on the books right now because we did delay action on that change. So in this case, they were just looking at, what other securities could you do? So a lot of these companies really were hitting on the fact that could you provide, sorry about that, guys. Yes, can you go outside of what the model investment policy is stating? But, hitting more importantly on the actual side of the fees, Acropolis did say regarding advisory fees, this fee schedule outlined in the RFP is the only fee. So no transaction fee, it's it, Central Trust, there are no additional fees. Columbia Capital, they said they do not charge fees over and above our proposed advisory fees. So once again, cleans that up. And then Commerce, 1 second here. So they pretty much were trying to break down what total fees really included. All of it includes investment advisory fees, the one that were stated, underlying manager fees, custodial and administrative fees. So the custodial is really just them being our bank, but the underlying manager fees were the only one that really raised my eyebrows, and also the administrative fees. So I would like to know a little bit more about that. But in this case, Councilmember Clark, we did just get these last answers today. We wanted to give them as much time as possible. There was 2 that submitted their answers today. I can go ahead and scan these in and then send you a copy after this meeting if that would be acceptable. Thank you, Councilmember Clark.
Any other questions or comments? They're looking for action, or if Councilmember Clark needs that wants that additional information, we may have to wait to see if that's the case for everyone as well.
In this case, what tonight was, tonight the department was hoping that, obviously, thank you so much, Mr. Saucier, for being here. But we were hoping to either, postpone that, obviously, if you want to get further information and keep looking into the responses that were given to you tonight, feel free to take those, and I'll send out an email with the attachment as a PDF. And then on top of that, if not that, to move forward with an option of the committee's choice. So coming to an agreement on who to be best, or if we go forward with any of them at all. So really just making that decision tonight or postponing it to a meeting very soon. So the main thing is, Dawn and I have been discussing, we just really want to make sure that we get that model investment policy updated to encompass the fact that we're using a firm to do advisory fees if we decide to go that route. And then also update it because there were some updates that needed to be done that were included in that. I think it was back in May where we provided it. So either or is fine, but I do understand with Ms. Clark being, remote today, I think it would be critically important for her to have all the facts. And Councilor Clark, I think has a question.
Councilmember Clark, do you have your hand still up? Do you wish to speak further, or?
I do. Thank you. I would move that we postpone until we get further information that we can go through these instead of just getting them and not not having the time for everyone, not just me, to look over them a little bit more thoroughly and to understand more about this commerce additional fees. If we could get more information about that other than just that there are additional fees.
Okay, so with that, Councilmember Clark, you okay with making a motion?
Yes, I move to do that.
And then Councilmember Farmer, I saw your hand was up second, so any other questions or comments on the motion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Anyone oppose or abstain? Okay, that motion then, again, passes, so will we see this one come back up again?
Thank you. Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Sauce. I appreciate you taking the time. I think everyone here is very grateful for your service to us, and thank you so much for serving as our Director of Investments too. We can't thank you enough for, just taking this on and really being a great partner in this whole process. So thank you so much, and I'll let you get back to it. I know you're at a football practice with your kids, so hopefully we didn't take you out too much here.
No, all good. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all, and if there's any other follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all too. Have a good evening.
So. Okay, thank you so much, David. I hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
I was just gonna ask, would it be helpful for him to look over the proposed policy updates or internal?
Oh, he
Investment policy.
did.
He did as
So,
well.
yeah, so, and if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, yeah, so the main thing here is what he was exposed to, and we Dawn and I tried our very best. We just wanted to give him just the documentation and say, hey, our committee is, we're looking for a good, non-biased source to give us an input. And in this case, we gave him the RFP we presented, we gave him all the submissions, we gave him the model investment policy that we had on the books. And then we also gave him the proposed model investment policy, which we were moving to have. And we did make a notation that if we were to bring on an advisory service manager, that would need a change. We would have to change that proposed policy as well. So he was exposed to those facts, and that's what turned into his brief summary sheet and his recommendation.
Great, well, that, we will now resume. Oh, Councilmember Clark, your hand is still up. Is that because you wish to say something, or you just trying?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. I failed to say a time on that motion, and I was wondering, do you think we can have that at the next meeting?
Councilmember Clark, that would be more than acceptable. We will have it for action and at the next meeting after this documentation you received in person today has been dispersed to everyone. And on top of that, we'll get that additional information about the additional fees from Commerce Bank. And if Maloney wants to submit a follow-up answer as well, we'll get that from them too and share it with the committee. Thank you.
Just because we did vote on that, there's agreement on that, or let me ask this the different way. Is anyone opposed with that? Okay, didn't think so, but let's make sure. All right, so let's get back to where we left off, which was we were going into the MyGov reporting. So I will hand it back to you and the attachment to regarding that. So this is exciting. First time we're seeing reporting coming out of this new system. Great to see that.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to share this with you, the reporting that you have in front of you, and sorry, here it is. Thank you. And also I do have some answers to a question that was posed by Councilmember Farmer that I'd like to walk through as well. There's some things that the court, they have that information and it's not something I can access, but what I wanted to show you is what this reporting is. It's permit reporting. So this is very similar to what the reporting could look like for code enforcement violation issues, but also a host of other issues too. We're talking work orders. I mean, eventually we want to migrate completely to that system. Unfortunately, it has been a little bit slower than expected. I know Dan has been running point on a lot of these projects, and so has Melanie Ripito. And in this case, what the process is here, creating the flow charts of, you click on this, it gets to this page, you click on this, it gets emailed to them. It is a very complex and tedious issue. And if Dan, if Rick's okay with you speaking to that, I think it might add some context here. But the main thing is we expect, and one thing after speaking with Melanie, who's been running point on the planning side, was that they are actually meeting with the planning department over at Manchester, the code enforcement officer that they have, who has MyGov currently implemented and is doing it right now. On top of that, they also are meeting with MyGov along with that code enforcement officer to smooth out the code enforcement side. So really, right now, if a resident reaches out and submits a code nuisance or a violation, it will go through, we receive it. That being said, our residents haven't been using it as much. We could push that further once we have the back end a little bit more straightened out, which the main goal of that would be to have the flow charts on the backside. So also getting our team some iPads, some updated iPads that have the functionality to be out on site, take pictures, and then insert those pictures into the actual into the program. So there are some items that need to be addressed before we can get that clean cut reporting, but we do expect to have at least the side of the reports coming in. We could provide a good report 30 days from now is what Melanie said based off the meetings that she has. So we do look forward to that. And if the committee would like, that could be presented as soon as possible. And then if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I can also go through some of the questions that were posed by Mr. Farmer that I think are pertinent. And I think it's a good learning experience for everyone. Okay, so there were quite a few and
I'll go, if you're on that same track, go ahead. I just have a question.
well, I think this is a good break.
Okay, well, before we were talking about how do we approach the businesses if there's something to miss? As our code enforcement representatives had any kind of training?
Oh, yes, for MyGov or
No, our city code
Like to talk
enforcement.
to people.
How
to
do
do
they
that.
approach the residents?
Oh,
Have they
yes.
had any kind of training?
yes, I mean, not, I have to double check the official capacity of it, but they've been doing it. You know, Frank and Brian have been here over 25 years, so they've definitely had the experience under their belts. When it comes to the administrative warrants, I am looking forward to looking into that a little bit more because you know, obviously we want to make sure we do everything by the book and have it as clean as possible. So as of right now, obviously you want to do the neighborly thing, but typically how the process works, and that kind of leads into this of where we're kind of at. We typically would provide, and I'll walk through each one of these questions, but you know, resident or whatever's going on, we notice an issue. The code enforcement team goes out, inspects it itself. If it is in fact against code, they then leave their card or they try to get a hold of the individual at the time. After that happens, if they don't get a hold of the individual, they do leave the card. And then from there, you know, they specifically have a little bit of time where it's like, hey, this is just a warning, just please get it done. After that, it obviously does escalate to eventually official notice. And then, you know, if you don't respond to it in a certain amount of time, which I'll get into, you know, at that point, we do turn it over and you get a citation. So this kind of leads into, there was a couple questions that were provided by Councilor Farmer, which I think were all very, very pertinent. And I think reading, I wrote up some answers here with the Director of Planning, Joe Vunich, to kind of give a better understanding. And I think this is just great for everyone to learn. So if you don't mind, if I could read through some of these. So questions 1 and 2, those were, you know, Joe and I spoke, and we do believe that that is really attributed to the courts. They have to take that on, but in this case, we could reach out as long as it's legally okay. I'll have to check with John Young about it, but question 3, what is the ratio of calls versus citations written? So this pretty easy answer here was an assessment of records is 10 calls to 1 citation. So we're typically getting 10 calls to 1 site, which is good. And then what is the average timeline from citation to resolution of a problem? So in this case, you know, what we've seen is a minimum of 10 days to address the violation is required by Missouri state statute. We give them that, obviously. And then that's typically the amount of time that we expect a resolution. In some cases, we work with people though. If, you know, someone's hitting tough times and unfortunately they just, you know, they lost a lawnmower, they don't have a lawnmower, or they, you know, they're just having a tough time, we will work with them. And that's the whole point of having code enforcement officers getting on the ground and learning about these individuals. So it's not just a statistic. Because these are our residents at the end of the day. I know not everything's perfect, but it's important to be neighborly in that regard, but obviously do it by the books. So other item here was how many visits are generally needed by city staff to solve a code issue? So a minimum of 2 visits. So one to check it out and another to check in and make sure that they actually did it. If they weren't there, then obviously it's going to take a few more visits, but in this case, one visit is to investigate the complaint and another is to follow up based on the amount of time provided to address the matter. So that's just typical, day to day what we do. Another question here was, what are the most common code issues and what are the most difficult to solve? This one we had to discuss a little bit, and what we found, and I agree with this. The definition of family, this is kind of funny, and determining the members and non-members of those families, so who's all living there, and then hoarders is a big one, big one. And that's a tough problem to solve. And it's sometimes a very big eyesore. And but at the end of the day, some of those individuals, it can be seen as a very big issue in their life. They do not want to get rid of those goods, and it is their property. So it's very delicate, and also you can't access the interior of their dwelling, so it's all external. So another thing I would like to mention here is that when you're approaching, and this is why I would adamantly state that we probably shouldn't be just putting these people's names and addresses on there, is that these are very delicate issues. I mean, I'm talking a resident here, their fence is a little ratty. Maybe they just lost their job and they get the citation typically, and I spoke with Joe because Joe is typically the first one to get this call. He gets a call and the person is completely scared at a point, and they just say, oh my gosh, what's going on? I've never received a ticket in my life, never got caught speeding. What's going on? And then they'll talk through it and, we'll give them that time. But, these people are shocked. They're a lot of the times very surprised and they're crying a little bit. And it's a very delicate situation. So you want to always treat this with ease and just with the humanity that it really deserves and needs. So I just wanted to make that very well known because it's a very nuanced. I think this is one of the more strange things that obviously city governments have to go through because every person is different and some people can have very harsh reactions to getting cited and getting a notice and all that. And some people, there's a reason why we have 2 code enforcement officers and they drive together because this is also a safety thing. You're enforcing code and you're also providing them with a disturbance in their life and giving them a ticket. So I just want to make sure to, first of all, thank our code enforcement officers because they really do put it in time day in and day out, and they do a great job. So with that being said, the timeline for citations to reach the court system, I think this is perfect. The municipal court generally has a monthly court date for zoning and other land use violations, and then other dates for trials. So that's why you get that 2 court dates per month. Generally, once a citation is issued, it can be several months before a resolution is reached. So these things take time, and that includes businesses that we're seeing too. So I just want to be straight up front. There is a process you have to go through, and it does take time. And that being said as well, the timeline, if a change in venue is sought, i.e. from our municipal court to a St. Louis County Circuit Court, this adds a substantial amount of time too. So this could be several months and if not more, before anything could actually be completed. So the minute it gets to the court system, you're talking court. So it's a lot more nuanced and multi-layered than one would expect. You would hope that they would just address the issue within that 10 days and we wouldn't have to go down that route. But we have had many instances, well, actually, 1 out of every 10 calls we get that end up having to get to that point, unfortunately. So questions, the questions here, and we can go through this later, offline, but there's a couple questions here that more so to the court, but what constitutes a problem property when it comes to code enforcement? Typically, the properties are repeated offenders and they generally, they have the same code problems. They are violating the same issues. So therefore, the city's implementing and enforcing a process on an ongoing basis of notices sent, summonses issued, the court adjudicates the case, and then the process restarts all over every time. Often these properties are almost always property maintenance issues. So main thing here, tall grass, building maintenance, storage of vehicles, specifically a lot of people with their, off-roading vehicles and their gigantic, what's the word? The RVs, yes. And then the org chart I actually wrote this down because I know you were talking about, but the planning director is established as the principal code enforcement officer by the zoning ordinance. This individual does answer to the city administrator, but they are answered in the code enforcement zoning ordinance that we do have. This also allows him or her to assign their responsibilities to another in the department. In this case, the position of code enforcement officer has been assigned such to Brian Gramlich. He does a great job at his role, and super happy to have him on this team and his dedicated effort. And then the assistant director of planning provides support as well as a code inspector, which assists in the code enforcement officers and generally, grading violations, stormwater compliance issues, unauthorized tree removals, just dead brush. But overall, that's, just kind of an update. I think it was important to learn. And if you guys have questions about anything that was just discussed, just know that, like I said, Melanie is working on getting that smoothly put into MyGov, so we have that data. It will be more high level, so just be expecting that, but we'll be able to have a better discussion on what's being reported through the portal. And hopefully, what my goal was to by, January 1st of 2021 for code enforcement issues, having things logged specifically in MyGov and have it be consistent. Available for any questions.
I don't see any hands up, so I'll just jump in. But I think, and Joe may mention this and others about having a good idea of the process flow. Because when there is an issue where there are complaints and there's a property that continues to be a problem, we are the ones that get the phone call. And I don't doubt that, the code enforcement officers are doing their job. I think they are. But I think looking at the whole process flow, I think there's one part of the process that we really never, ever see. And I don't think they are aware sometimes how painful it is for us. And I think that's when it goes to the prosecutor. Because the prosecutor works on behalf of the city to prosecute these type of issues. And so if the prosecutor is not in touch with what we're feeling and hearing, then how do we know whether they're working really hard to address that issue or giving someone a break? And I think that's where, and maybe that's, is it something, how do we connect that? Do we invite them to hear about some of the issues we're hearing so that, because they are part of the line of defense when we look at it. I think that's a potential opportunity there because we all have to be on the same team. And if not, then, obviously not getting anything done. So that's where I'm thinking of. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Ripper, are you gonna say something?
No, I don't get directly involved in it, other than I think from the perspective of staff, we're following the code and the ordinances, and that's the main guiding principle, frankly.
Yes, and then on top of that, though, and this is a John Young question, of course, but the main thing is there is supposed to be a very distinct difference between, administrative staff and people writing the code violations and the court. There has to be that strict wall, especially after, recent events in the last 5-6 years. So, there are some legal questions there that we don't want to cross. So, a follow-up with John Young, just about what that is and what we need to make sure we're doing if we want to make that connection. I don't know for sure. Obviously, we had the municipal judge come in and speak to council at the last meeting. So, those kind of things could potentially happen, and maybe we have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation. But as for the staff, we can't be working behind the scenes with the court because that could be viewed very negatively to the outside.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that, there's a process here, but, everyone has to be on the same page. It's no different than crimes, right? When you have the police out there, but if they're making citations and then the prosecutors are not doing their job, you end up having a failed system. So, it's how do we make sure that we're all on the same page?
Yeah, thank you for answering that stuff, Thomas. Really I think the big thing for me, and I'm glad you guys are working on the MyGov thing, because I put something into it, I think yesterday, and I kind of know what I'm doing in there, and it was still very difficult for me to do it. So I think from a communication standpoint with these things, there are certain things that, when it gets to the court system, it is out of our hands. There's nothing that we can do about it. But for those residents that are generating those complaints to us, you know, rightfully so, they don't really love the answer like, hey, man, it's in the courts. I can't do anything. I can't tell you anything. I don't know anything about it. There's not, I can't do it. I don't even know who to tell you to contact to figure this out. So I'm thinking about, and Tracy, you had this too. There's, I mean, there is a specific property over in Point Clayton, which is now in Ward 4, that to my understanding has been through this court system several times. I happened to be over there the other day and I'm like, I'm looking at these pictures, looking at the house, it doesn't look any different, so I'm not sure what, if anything, was done. Apparently there was some kind of a judgment that occurred, but like, I'm not an expert on this stuff, so I don't even know what I'm supposed to look at. It looked like a mess. Yeah.
So yeah, the main thing I would like to say there, we even as a court system, we cannot force someone to actually do the work to fix up their property, whatever it might be. And in general, what I would say to that is, you know, they'll get a fine. They'll have to pay a fine and it doesn't look good. You got a citation on your record. So it's not good, but no matter what we do, there are some, and I just wanted to make this note, there are going to be some problem properties that are repeat offenders that just go through the entire system and they do not actually fix the issue. And unfortunately, that's the reality we live in. That being said, you know, I think, you know, I could speak for the entire team and say that we're always willing to, you know, find ways to be more proactive and get that word out and hopefully help people, you know, understand like we're doing this to have a, you know, keep our home prices high, keep our community safe, keep our community looking good and make it look like the Wildwood we want it to be. So I think there, if you can turn this into more of a positive spin, and obviously work with the individuals, that's why we have those grants that individuals can get to help do improvements. You know, those kind of things I think we could maybe look into a little bit more. So the individuals that just don't have the money, maybe they have some solutions to the issues that we're trying to address.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge, codes are important. Enforcing the codes are, I mean, if we're gonna have them, we should enforce them properly, but a lot of this stuff is, it's a communication thing and it's just, you know, I mean, it is a tracking thing. So, I mean, we have the system. If you guys need iPads, I'm happy to get, I will make a motion to get you iPads. How many would you like?
Well, we actually would need 4.
Great.
Councilmember Farmer.
Let's
Are
do,
you making that motion?
I will make the motion to get you guys the necessary.
This is a for information item, but
We'll see it on the agenda next time.
yeah, I would like the iPads.
It's under 10,000, the city.
It is under 10,000, so
Already.
if I can get a general gist here, we can get the iPads.
But I think, you know, and everyone, I'm sure agrees with this. This is not to target those law-abiding citizens. They're doing a good job. It's actually not fair to those people who actually do care about their property and maintain it. And then you have that situation. Now, sometimes there are those rare occurrences. And again, I think communication a lot of time fixes that. You never have to get that far, but then there's that small number that just constantly repeating the issue and whatever been attempted is just not working. And so I think that's really where we're trying to get to the root of this. Now, I did have a conversation and I also understand out of that conversation that apparently there's some constraints that are imposed on us by the state. So some of the fines are really that, you know, you can't go any higher than what the state allows. So, you know, in those cases, we may have to, well, to see how we can get folks on board, you know, whatever means possible. Who had their hand up?
I did, and I think I lost my thought.
Okay, you find it, let us know. We'll let you cut the line.
Oh, I know what it was.
Oh, wait, all right, Miss, let me
Yes,
cut you.
Mr. Lee.
Mhm.
So you just mentioned the possibility of grants for residents if they need some assistance, financial assistance with their home or making repairs. I don't think our citizens are aware of that. Could we maybe put something in the next newsletter or on the website? I mean, because we don't use our community development block grant funds so much for that because income levels in the city, and that's why we use it for the senior programs. So if there are some available, I really doubt that our residents know that.
Yes, we can 100% do that, and I'll check specifically what we have there, so we're not making false promises. But if we do, we can put it in the newsletter, we can put it on our web, well, it is on our website, but on top of that, maybe have a nice little piece about it in the e-newsletter. I mean, not the next Gazette.
Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that it was key what you said, Chair Garitano, about how do we know if we're all on the same page? It's that communication thing. And the MyGov is going to help, but when it gets to the courts, we sometimes we have issues that were sent to the court and then we don't know what happened to them. Things aren't getting done, aren't changing, but we don't know, is it because the people just aren't complying? Or is it because the court hasn't done their part yet? Is there a timeline that they're under? If there was a way that we could get some information back, some communication on where they're at and what the holdup is, and if it's going to be changed, or if we're just going to have to live with it.
I just want to add one point, Councilman Clark. I mean, I think just to that point, even of what the communication is, even to a resident once it goes to the court, because basically, yeah, I mean, it's basically out of our hands, but do we at least have say like, we literally are completely cut out of the loop at this point, but this is where you can try to get updates or whatever for your stuff, but it's not us. Basically, we don't know, but at least having something to give them a direction and say, this is where you can check on the status of whatever it is you got going on. That's at least an answer rather than being like, oh, it's in the court.
Yeah, I would think MyGov should be able to do that. I mean, it does send nice updates when things are going through the process so, I mean, I just know for some of the residents around me, like, they will understand it's in the court's hands, there's nothing that can be done, but they would like to know, hey, this hasn't vanished, this went to court. We'll,
They just want communication. Sorry to interject.
Yeah,
in there, but
exactly.
the People
So
just
that-
want something that says,
this is what's going on.
I said whatever,
Yep.
I'm done with you. Your problem is somebody else's. I forget about you now. Like they just want to know they didn't get forgotten about.
Yeah, I mean, I would think, I don't know, I haven't looked in the back of it, but I would think that system can just say, hey, this like. Here's step 1, 2, and 3, 4 is to the court, that's the email that goes, and then, I would imagine that we. As a city, want to be hands off with that, but there should be someone in the court system that residents can contact if they want to know what's going on, I would think. As long as it's not us. That might be a John question, I guess.
Yeah, so I'll contact the city attorney on that one just to confirm, but I know we do have 2 full-time court staff members and 1 assistant part-time. Obviously, I can't discuss those matters with her or them, but I can see what we can do to hopefully share that information.
Yeah, just a hint, we've done all we can do.
Yep.
Here's the next person you need to talk to.
To let residents, especially the ones that aren't actually violating the code, understand where it is, and just transparency is key. I mean, PaceNet exists, so I mean, you break a criminal law. I think the law does apply differently to code violations, but where is that transparency and what can we actually send out? What can we put out there? So we can clear that up, and I'll speak with the city attorney about just that.
I think it would be very helpful because I think we've never had that kind of transparency yet. We are the ones that are responsible for appointing those roles. And the court is also reporting to us what they're doing each month. So it's helpful to understand because there may be issues that maybe we can address from the legislative perspective that would help them in their job. But without us knowing, how will we ever get that done? Councilmember Heath.
I just want to echo this. So I have residents right now that are trying to maneuver issues through the court system. And I have made very clear to them that I can help you get to the right person. I can try to get you updates or check the timeline, but I can't put my thumb on the scale of justice. What I am finding is that it is a emotional process for them because of a lot of delays. And it's a lot of, we're not ready to take this to court. We're postponing. So what we get are questions like, does your prosecutor actually do their job? And that makes it hard without that information loop closed, because as Chair Garitano said, we're in charge of confirming that appointment. So we really do have to understand, not to influence the decision-making process, not to put our hand on the thumb of justice, are they doing their job expeditiously and giving a reasonable wait time for that situation to be resolved? And if I had to answer that today, it would be, I don't know, or I'm thinking we're not doing a good enough job. Because I have had outstanding issues, and then by the time they get to the court, because the judge does try to work with, you know, the individual that has been cited, they'll get extensions or they get told to come back with a plan. And it's because the prosecutor office maybe took an extra 4 months. So that process doesn't start until that first court date. And then now it's on its third court date, and then there's no resolution and everybody's angry. The person that didn't have, you know, clear instruction about their code violation, the person that's mad because they're looking at the code violation. And then meanwhile, we're getting asked, why is the city taking so long? So I need to be able to answer that question a little bit better. And I'm not satisfied with what I've seen. Again, not in terms of results, but in the way that we have conducted business for our residents.
All right.
Can I ask one more thing? Sure. That, I think it was the last question. Do we regularly review the code, our codes, and make sure things are what they're supposed to be, or is that, I don't remember having done that.
Well, I guess, yeah.
All right, I think we had some good discussion on that, and sure we'll see if there's some opportunities to better understand how the process works coming up. All right, so with that, we'll move on with our agenda here. So we're going to move now. We already covered the investment advisory services submissions. So we'll move on to the phase 2 address list, and I will hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Chair. What you were handed to today and what we'll have on the screen over here is the updated phase 2 address list. I do apologize for that previous meeting. I went through and combed through it, and I did notice that there were inquiries that were not related to phase 2. They were complaints about construction, things along those lines. So the wrong list was uploaded into the map and also was provided. So in this today, you will see, you got one physical attachment, but you got two, and be up here too. And two normal attachments, one being the actual list of addresses that I would very much encourage you to walk through and see if that makes sense. And you'll see, and what I'd like to show too is the difference in the two maps. So this is the map that was presented before, and this is the new map. So obviously it does show that, you take out those addresses that were in that first phase. So I combed through meticulously and got every single one of those and made sure that if it's on this red list, they asked for phase 2 and they 100% are not in phase 1.
I'm sorry, I should have waited. We still see dots on the west side of 109. So, and I remember there being conversation about the donuts, filling the donuts. Are you confident that these dots on the west side are not donuts? And they're not gonna I see one very close to my home. All the areas in that area are gonna be covered. Why would that home not get covered with all the others?
So, and thank you so much, Mr. Chair, do you mind if I speak to that? Okay, so in this case, where you see the super hot spot here, where you start seeing red, that is, a culmination of homes. That being said, these here or there might be one or two, but what I was using was the master list. And sometimes things that are on the master list, that aren't on the master list, they get covered because they're already going past that house anyway, so they just fill it. We were expected to have 2,025 homes included in phase 1. So in this case, we might actually end up seeing 2,200. So we might be getting an extra 150 homes for free because it's convenient for them and it's worth it for them. So in this case, there might be a few that are in that category, but I am pretty confident, especially here near Hart Road, that was one of the weirdest gaps that just weren't covered, unfortunately. And if it's not on the master list, then there's no contractual obligation for them to actually do it in this phase. So unfortunately, the whole donut hole conversation, they keep coming back to the fact that was not agreed upon. And I was not part of those negotiations, unfortunately. So it seems like there's a couple spots that were just missed. What I will say is though, how the, kind of the methodology here, these were all resident inquiries that came in either from HOAs or from actual residents in individual houses. The HOAs, obviously, we covered whole streets, subdivisions, neighborhoods, all that good stuff. And then I went in, had those lists, and I combed through them meticulously to ensure that they were not included in phase one. And that these individuals had stated that their internet was, not fast. What I will say is what I found was interesting, and I know Councilmember Farmer has brought this up a couple times, was that a couple of these like small dots, if you see the blue with the small little red dot in the middle, that is particularly stating one address. So in this case, there are some where you will find a house in the most densely populated area and none of their neighbors had reached out. So I do, I really need the internet speed data from Spectrum that we are waiting on. Right now, I will say our city attorney spoke with their attorney today and we are getting really close to the NDA. And what I will say is that during probably next month's meeting, this NDA will come to admin PW and not the NDA, but the actual data. And we will have to go into a closed session based off the fact that we will be signing a non-disclosure. In this case, we will be passing out that information so you can see the data and confirm with your own eyes, but then that paper will actually have to be received back. It's a very meticulous process just to make sure we don't breach that agreement. So just giving you a kind of an insight of what's to come. But to go through here, what's been going on here, I give an update on the NDA. We're getting very close. We should have it finalized very soon. In this case as well, phase one progression, I did want to touch on this because I have a new update that's not even listed here. Right now, maps 1, 2, 3, 5, and now map 6, starting on Friday, are all active, which kudos to them. It's been a lot of hard work on both sides, ours and theirs, but I will say it's very satisfying to see this. And I've already gotten a couple calls from the residents that were in map 6 that I shot them a little email and they were very pleased. They were very nice to me. So I just, it's very nice working with these individuals and I'm very excited whenever they actually get it. 2 of them told me that they had their installation date scheduled in 2 weeks. So that's all great in their map 6. So things are going along smoothly. I did also want to just really quickly note that, obviously phase 2 is coming up and we need to get moving on it. Because at the end of the day, if we want uninterrupted construction, and I'll just be honest with you, from my conversations with Spectrum, it seems like it's going to be a little bit more hefty on the price tag side. So we'll get into that, but I first wanted to note that while we wait for this internet speed data, which should show each home's residents and what their speed is, and if it's below 100 megabits per second, and especially if it's below 25 megabits per second, which I know Councilmember Jaxie here has to experience, and gosh, I'm sorry. In this case,
Me too.
yeah, in this case though, if you want to check out a little bit more, the broadband.money slash broadband, that link is super helpful, but it's from October 1, 2022. It's not the most up-to-date data, unfortunately, because we've been doing an entire project since then, so it doesn't record that. But the broadband map at fcc.gov, that one, it's not as good about looking at aggregate data, which is why we're really hoping that Spectrum can come to us with really good information and good data so we can compare the ones that have been recorded, but then also compare that to the speed so we can say, oh, this person is not lying. They do have poor internet speed. We really want to use that as a determinant of who gets into phase 2 and who doesn't, and hopefully get as to many as residents as possible. But I'll get into why, tough decisions might be laying ahead. So feel free to check out those links. I think they are very helpful. On the FCC map, you can actually type in every single address in Wildwood and it'll bring up a profile of what their speeds are. So it's just, it's very tedious to go through 35, actually more like 12,000 residents and get that on a spreadsheet. So we're having Spectrum do that for us because, we don't have too many resources here. That being said too, though, phase 1 is moving smoothly and I'm excited because phase 2 is, right around the corner. And I think this, we want to make sure that this phase 2 is it, or at least, if there's anything left, the resident could cover for themselves, or it could be part of the serviceability program under Spectrum for them to make more additional profit. We don't want to have to wait another 5 years for some residents to get it. If they can't, we want to identify it. But I did want to bring just a very important update about the funding. So currently, right now, we have, we received $7.28 million dollars from the federal government for ARPA funds. In this case, we have spent a good portion of that, obviously on phase one, about 6.75 million. So we do have $468,000 left in that account. That being said, too, we actually have been able to make a little bit more off investing with that money. So we do have a little bit more. I think it's like I want to say 580, 590-ish. So we've made some money off it to put right back into the program. But that, to me, with the 471 addresses that have already been reported, it's not going to be enough. My rough estimate, based off my understanding, I'm way more knowledgeable now of how this whole system works and how this spectrum works in general too, and how broadband infrastructure is built out. But with just 471 addresses, I mean, with the inflation that's kicked in, I could see them quoting us $2 million for just that. And we might find, and what you might also want to note too, is that when you see these small dots, if we actually find that those are underneath, they're gonna have to build out the entire street. So we could end up looking at a whole nother list of 2,000 residents, and we might be looking at another bill of over $7 million potentially. So that's why tonight I wanted to provide you with this updated information. I wanted to show that, you know, we cleaned up the data, made sure we had everything we could, but then also I wanted to state that I would like to submit this cleaned data version to Spectrum so we can just start getting an idea of what this is going to cost us. And then once we get the data back from them, we can obviously always change that list and say, hey, that was a great initial proposal, but we looked at the data. Here are the finalized addresses. So this is not the final, but this is what I would like to do, is get the motion tonight that the department is requesting, is submit the addresses that are listed here and go ahead and move forward with getting an initial quote. Get the data in, compare, and then present a new copy after that data has been compared. One last thing to note before I'll open it up to, Chair can open it up to the questions, is that the BEAD program, it does provide an additional round of funding. So my only concern here, and I just wanted to break it out for you, we will, Jake Silverman, our legislative consultant, and myself will be meeting with the Director of Broadband Infrastructure Expansion in Missouri, BJ Tanksley, on the 14th, I believe. It's in my count, the 13th. And we'll be discussing a little bit more details about how we can get ahead of the curve. I will say, from what I've heard, you know, with speaking with our legislative consultant, but also speaking with other cities, other city administrators, it seems like this application won't be live till January, which is just far too late. We will still apply. But my issue here is that if we want to have construction start April 5th, after phase one is supposed to be complete, we're going to need to move a little bit quicker than waiting for that funding to fully come in. So what we could potentially do, and we'll have to get this into the negotiations, but we do another fee schedule like we did, a payment schedule. We could always work in that, hey, you know, 6 months out, whatever it might be, we'll probably be experiencing that first invoice, maybe even a year. So we would have time for those, because I wouldn't say that awards would be granted probably till next August, and that's a rough estimate. I'll have way more information after talking to BJ Tanksley. But it's going to take some time for this funding to actually become available and get into the pockets of us. And a big note here is that median household income plays a large role in who gets this funding. It's not ARPA funding. It's not, you know, ARPA funding, the restrictions were not as, you know, they're just not as tedious as the ones that the BEAD program is expected to have. And our median income, I do believe, is going to hurt us, along with the fact that we did receive funding for internet infrastructure from the ARPA funds. So I want to just be blunt and just know that, you know, I do this with the best, you know, best intentions, is that we are going to probably have some tough decisions to make, because this is a lot of money. And I know our residents really want it. But we're going to just need to look at that data and really see how much this is going to cost, because Spectrum has pretty much stated that it's not going to be as cheap as it was, because everything has just gone up exponentially. Yeah, it's cheap as, yes, I agree with you there. But in this case, though, the department will be providing updates weekly. You'll see these in the weekly report from the under legislative consultant tab under administration. About this and where the BEAD programming funding is at, and we will be applying as soon as we can, as long as eligible. But I will say right now we are looking at a hefty price tag, and we don't have the ARPA funds still to cover that phase two. So more info to come.
Sorry, Lauren, and then.
Thank you for the tremendous amount of work that you've done. The venom in my voice is not directed at any staff member in this room. I appreciate all of you. You're very much on cleanup duty at this point. we had a staff member who is no longer with us, initially tell us, no one will be left behind, and then it was no one in wards 1 or 6 will be left behind. And then, oh, by the way, immediately we'll start on ward 2. Sorry, we left you behind, even though we promised you wouldn't. And I had residents that were told by that staff member, and I was present, that they would already have internet by now. And then that kept moving. So there is a lot of broken down trust. So I can tell you what's coming down the road, which is for the residents in Ward 2 that are very upset. They're on the basically unserved scale. So they might as well have a hamster with a tinfoil hat on a wheel powering their internet because they're at less than 12 megabits per second or no internet at all or hotspots only. So what they're gonna say is, you're gonna expand this to people that just have slow internet. So 100 upload, download, whatever. How dare you make me wait on more funding for a phase 2 when you have money in the bank that applied to us legally because we're so unserved, and you could go ahead and get started on me first. And I would like to echo that. So if we have to have a phase 2A and a 2B, I don't really care, but I know that they're not going to be okay with waiting because they were left out before and not funded while we try to figure out how to expand it and fund everybody else that just has slow internet. So my expectation is that Charter doesn't get to dictate whatever's easier for them to pass by, that on phase 2, we're really paying attention to the people that have basically no service get served first by Charter, period. And I love that you guys are holding them accountable and actually checking to see if they installed internet. Because we as in several council members, wards 1, 6, and 2 asked for that before. And we were shot down by that staff member that essentially, well, self-reporting is good enough. And that's not what we do with other contracts. That's not what we're gonna do with a big multi-million-dollar contract. So thank you for actually making sure the work is done. So. I feel like I have some news to report, but nothing tangible. But again, my expectation is that the money that we have, we go ahead and start spending because that can legally apply to a different group of people. And there's no reason why the people on, smoke signals at this point should have to wait on other people to improve their also bad, but still serviceable internet.
We got Deborah and then Rob.
Yeah, so I know we got the ARPA funds, but I thought at some point the city or the council agreed to put $6 million into the internet service. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
So we have 6 million on top of the ARPA funds, correct?
I believe, from my understanding, we only have the ARPA funds unless the city, okay, I was not privy to that information.
I think the original vote was 3 from us, 3.75 from the federal government. Was the original.
We received from ARPA funds 7.28.
Yes, so that's because somebody on our staff delayed long enough for us to get that. So don't, I'm gonna get fired up about this because I agree 100%.
And the extra 3.5 was supposed to go to something else.
Okay, so
Watershed.
I would like to.
Watershed.
Right.
Yeah.
that.
That never happened.
I can give you.
Yeah, that would be fantastic if you don't mind.
All right, so, yeah, and I think, I know I left off in those discussions because I've got areas off of Old State Road that, just like Councilmember Edens and Councilmember Jackson knows how very passionate I was and,
And rightfully so, and I'm right there with.
So I think there is the intent to, fund it. Obviously, it won't matter what that number is. But, we want to get the job done for all.
But we don't want to forget that we set that money aside,
Yes, and now I need.
specific purpose
Well,
and.
now I need to look at that earmark too, because if we have an additional 3 million on top of the 40, the 480,000, then we have a show here. We could move forward and hopefully get reimbursed from the BEAD program, but we would have to spend that on internet as well. You can't spend that on anything else.
I agree with you, but I think what you're gonna hear from our attorney is we approved it for a very specific
We did.
vote. And so while I don't think you could just count on that 3, we would have to vote again, but I think what you can take away from that is you have all the same people here, I think, that made that vote that would probably be ready to support it again if it you know, got to what our point was, which is getting connection to the people that need it. I do have.
You
Sorry.
might want to take a look at what the motion was and how it was stated and if it had an amendment to it or not. So we know exactly what we can spend it for
All the way back.
without having to come back.
It was in a work session, wasn't it?
No, it was
No.
on a council meeting.
Council
It was a
meetings.
council.
I'll check.
Okay, so I would very much like to echo what Lauren said, which is actually, I want to add to it, maybe make a suggestion, and that is, I will make the motion right now for you to move forward with getting this to Spectrum. Getting the information to Spectrum, but what I want back is a spreadsheet. And I want a spreadsheet that basically shows, here's the homes that we think need connectivity. Here's the homes Spectrum thinks need connectivity. And I'd really like it broken down to the why we think these homes need connectivity and why Spectrum thinks, because to Lauren's point, right? You're talking to a guy who's been on less than 6 megabytes per second for 8 years, right? And I have a very empathetic bone for all of those people that are dealing at that speed. And you know what? I lived through COVID with that, and I was a teacher on Zoom with that, and I made do. It wasn't wonderful, but I made do. So when I hear residents complaining about 25 or 30 or 50 or 75 megabytes per second, I do struggle to have empathy for them. And so I don't want us to delay if we can avoid it. So I would just ask, as you give that, and I would encourage you to be careful about talking about the money right now, because frankly, we have no clue what that's gonna be. 400,000 may actually cover all those people that are below 25 or whatever the number is. It's a difficult target to fix. I get it. You got a thankless job doing this right now. But as you work with Spectrum, recognizing that they're in business and they're going to try to make as much money as they can off of this, which I appreciate. My end goal is to get connectivity to these folks. I really would love to see that spreadsheet broken down into the whys. These people got to have it. I will be I promise that man right there. You know, that I would push to get that vote for phase 2 as quickly as we could get it. And was told, no, we gotta wait. We gotta wait for phase 1 to be done before we can even start phase 2. And I still to this day don't understand or agree with that, but I've shut up in color as long as I'm gonna shut up in color. So.
Just echoing on that, yeah, I just don't understand why we don't have a list of saying phases 1, this is the list of addresses of phase 1, we're done. So now it's done. Everything should be able to start moving through phase 2. There's why we would sit and wait. It makes no sense. So, but yeah, I agree either having a breakdown and comparison of why this is where the differentiations are between Spectrum and us. I think it might be hard to put a whole like note of like, this is why, but even just like, this is the speed that we come up with. I don't know how you get that data, but like just having that together to say, well, you're saying they're fine, this is what we come up with, you know.
In this case, I think the data that we're getting, the internet speed data, I think is going to be an absolute, breath taker, and it's gonna really help support our argument here, because what we'll be able to do is, it's literally going to be a list, it's gonna be a list, Excel doc probably, that will be every address in the city of Wildwood, along with its corresponding speed and its current provider, if it has one. So what we'll be able to do is I'll be able to take those addresses along with the corresponding speed and coordinate it and compare it to the addresses I have in this Excel sheet that I printed out for you all. And in that case, we'll be able to say, okay, from our resident inquiries, 90% of them are less than 100. So obviously they're self-reporting very well here. And then we'll also be able to see, other places that might not have gotten the message, but clearly need internet.
And I'm sorry, did I miss that where I did, but where the data is coming from, the internet speed reported data, is that reported from the person that's living there? Do they have a ping test?
So it's more so based off the infrastructure. So FCC, it's a compilation of the FCC that's where all this funding is coming from. They're noticing all these rural areas that are so underserved. They're looking into those, looking under every rock, but also on top of that, there's tons of nonprofits, tons of intergovernmental entities, and then Spectrum has its own. A notice here, guys, is that Spectrum actually is they applied and got ARPA funds as well to expand in different projects because they want to continue making money, but also people need the internet. So in this case, a lot of the time, you're gonna see someone it's just more so, they're gonna provide us information for people. I think there's a good amount we could trust it. Obviously, we probably want to do some fact checking ourselves, which those links I provided in the memorandum. Definitely take a look yourself. You can actually take a look now and see the good information.
Trust but verify.
Yeah, yep, trust but verify, just like we do with the invoice.
So what is the speed that the city deems acceptable?
Above 100 megabits per second, and that's typically what the federal government uses as if you're above it, you're not underserved, you're served. Not necessarily, it's not necessarily great. A lot of places they have 500 to a whole terabyte of data that you're getting. So it's that is a big thing, is that typically with these individuals, depending on how much you're willing to pay for your internet per month, you will see over 500 megabits per second easily. So I mean, you're looking pretty slow, and I think. Yeah.
Well,
Seriously. And I think there's a lot of.
I don't even have a gig, man.
Well, I mean, that's the possibility here, and I don't know, I just want to tell you that the department's 100% committed to ensuring that any resident that we deem needs it and has reported it, and it clearly states that they need it, we're good. I would support and I would recommend getting it.
So on the NDA, which I'm pretty familiar with NDAs, one of the questions I think you need to have in advance is will we at least be able with the data to be able to say, rack and stack it and say 75% of our homes are below 25 megabytes per second? Because that makes it very easy for this body to say, okay, these 75%, can we talk in big numbers, if not specifics, talk in big numbers, and then we can say, well, that 75% equates to 1,000 homes. Great, let's make a bill, let's get some funding pushing forward and get that. So as you're talking about the NDA with them, just try and get enough specificity that we can get access to data that we can use beyond closed doors if we need it.
And that'll be a discussion, is what can be disclosed and what can't. And I've been speaking with the city attorney about this back and forth, and main thing is with this data they're giving it to us, they spent a lot of money on getting this. And, obviously, we want that, we want access to it, but so that information will have to be close to the vest, but more generalized information.
There should be some clear cutoffs. There will be some clear cutoffs where we can make a very educated decision about how we spend the resources.
You will all have access to that. It would be in closed session, but in that case, you will have access to that. The list that I'm talking about with the internet speeds, you will have access to that. And obviously I'll do some work on it before it gets there, so you can see after we compare them.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom.
So do we need a motion?
Excuse me, Chair, I've had my hand up through this whole thing. Can I be recognized?
Sure, please, and yeah, since I can't see if you
I didn't
see it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I like this idea and just trying to put it all together with what's been said. We need a list that's of all of the addresses that are in Wildwood, and somehow from the FCC or nonprofits or Spectrum. Although I don't trust Spectrum's list because of having mistakes in them in the past, but to find out in the spreadsheet to have a list of all the addresses plus their speeds, and compare that with phase 1 addresses that Spectrum says they will or have covered, and the phase 2 addresses that are to be covered that have been, and then we'll have the rest of them on the spreadsheet that are not covered in phase 1, are not covered in phase 2, so we can, and have those speeds so we can see where the pockets are. So we make sure that we cover the ones that are out on Old Straight Road, or the ones in the donut hole, or the ones in Ward 2 that need it the most. And because I'm just afraid that if we don't do it like that and have all of these addresses to our in front of us, we're gonna miss somebody and come back and go, oh, now we need a phase 3 because we missed some of the people that didn't raise their hand, did not stand up and say that they even know. There's people that don't even know we're getting Spectrum. There's people that don't even know that we've changed trash haulers. So there are people that don't have internet, that don't know they have to raise their hand and say, I need it. So we have to look at that ourselves because we have told people that we'll do it. Plus, there are people who are waiting for it a long time and have been promised, like Lauren was saying, that have not gotten it. And yes, I might sound a little upset about it myself, but you know, we told the people what we were told, and now we have to go back and say, I'm sorry, we were wrong about some of the things. But that's one of the things. The second thing is, don't we have to bring this to the council at some way to go ahead and move forward on this project with Spectrum, if that's who, or maybe lay it out there with if there's anyone else, because we haven't just had any vote on who we're going to on this project at all of phase 2. We only voted on bringing them in for phase 1. Don't we need to move back a little bit and go through the process of bringing Spectrum, if that's who we decide on to do this? Because I'd ask in the past, did we already tell them they are definitely going to do phase 2? And I'd been told, no, we did not tell them that. We had not made that decision in the council yet. So that's one of my major questions on this.
Thank you, Councilor Chair Garritano. In this case, we wouldn't have, and I spoke with John Young about this, city attorney. We would need a council approval to move forward with any plan. We don't need council approval to just send the list to get a quote. No issue there. But I wanted to make sure you all were very involved in this process, obviously learning from, what happened in the past. In this case, though, if we were to move forward with Spectrum for phase 2, there would be no need to open up to new bidders, things like that. The way John explained it was that it was completely fine because you are continuing a project that's currently undergoing, and the professional services clause allows you to be able to continue that service. So if the thing is, it is up to the council. This is you all's decision, your all's decision. And if you guys do decide to move with a different company, then that is completely up to you.
Lauren?
Quick thought, bouncing off of what Councilmember Clark said. So just to restate what happened before you were here. So that same staff member in a meeting said, don't worry, we're going to continue to negotiate and add all the homes so nobody's left behind. The charter rep stood at the podium in front of the public and said, the list is the list. If it's not on the list, it's not going to make it. And so the council was told something different, but charter was pretty upfront about that. And people knew that voting. But my point is there a way to do this new phase 2 almost with a change order? Somebody's happy over next door.
You don't hear that at committee meetings very often.
Go see what's going on.
Yeah, there might be cookies or something. But is there a way, I mean, we do this for like cost overrun or project scope creep, like up to 10% or, for other types of contracts. Is it possible to do that up to X number of homes and negotiate a flat rate? So regardless of where it is, and you're right, there are people that don't know that they will need to expand or report the internet, because there are residents in some of my neighborhoods that it is, as it's been relayed to me, there'll be an elderly individual that says, I don't see the point. I don't stream videos. My grandkids use internet. I don't. I'm not paying for it, right? So that would be the example of somebody that's not gonna self-report that they have an internet problem. They sell the house, the new person moves in, and we find out they're not on the list. Is there a way to say, like, we have the ability to change the scope, like up to 50 more homes at X rate per home, if we choose to, as a change order?
Yes, so are you talking about for a phase two?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
So that if, as this happens, that we don't need a phase three.
Yes, that would be part of the negotiation, but that's something obviously we can ask, yes.
I would like that, because I know it's gonna happen, and you just don't need a phase three for one home, or 2 homes, or 10 homes.
Yep. So, yeah, I think that maybe during that negotiation, I'll have to speak with the city attorney, but hopefully we could have it be a limit. You know, if, as long as the number of homes that are added after a certain date, X date after execution, that as long as it's under 50 or under 100, whatever it might be,
Something,
they will add that as a change order, but then change, and then the council would just need to approve the difference in aggregate funds going towards that project.
That's what I'm looking for. Perfect, okay.
What was the action that was requested for tonight? What do you need a proposal for?
Yes, the department is requesting a motion to move forward with the list presented tonight to get an initial quote, and then the NDA will be finalized shortly. Then we'll have that internet data speed, so we'll be presenting that hopefully at the next month's meeting, but hopefully we'll have a quote too for the 471 addresses included.
Okay, so we have Councilmember Hopper, seconded
Jim Bob
by
already did.
I'm okay with it. That's fine.
Michelle. Do we have a motion on the floor already?
Jackie's motion was that he would like list back the phones at Spectrum and the city need connectivity for phase 2.
Oh, can we roll that into the main motion?
It's basically the same
Just
thing.
submit the addresses to Spectrum.
Okay. So to make sure, since you had already started making a motion, but I guess we never got a second, is that right, Michelle?
That's correct.
Okay, so to be respectful, if we could allow the first motion and you can second it, I'll give it to you.
I don't care as long as.
As long as you're both on the same page.
Yes.
Both
We're
the
on the same
makers,
page.
at
Yes,
second.
down.
All right, and you're clear on the motion, Michelle? Do you need it clarified?
The first one,
Well,
It's
yeah.
is it what oh,
Let's-
it's all
The one
one
that's
now.
on the floor now.
And can I make a quick brief comment before that too?
Do you want to make that now?
Yeah, so another thing too, and I think this is important, and I've spoken with our Director of Public Works, Rick Brown. I think it's pertinent in phase 2, any phase 2 that we move forward with, that we hire some kind of engineering consultant and get them planned like ASAP to bird dog the spectrum, have them out on the field and just examine what they're doing. That individual will be able, they're our ally. And in the negotiation, I do plan on pushing for the fact that they need to have a customer service rep dedicated to our citizens that are in phase 2. So those 2 things, but we would have to take care of the consultant side. I'm expecting them to take care of the customer service rep. But I do think I'm going to propose that we earmark some money during the budget season this year to ensure that we have someone bird dogging those exact things, because I think that's the most important thing. We would be able to give you great updates every week, every day, if we had someone out there in the field that installs this stuff themselves, but works on a consulting firm and could just be watching what they're doing, making sure they're working within easements, making sure that they're doing it properly, so we're not having erosion issues 5 years down the road. Obviously, we're checking to make sure internet's been installed, but is it being installed correctly, and are we knowing where it's being installed? So I think that's an important piece. It does cost additional money. That being said, I think it's money well spent. Thank you.
All right, I have a question on the motion. Regarded in the motion, because I purposely didn't include the quote when I started to make my motion, because I was concerned that it would actually muddy our waters a little bit. And what I would rather get back is something that we can use to make a decision on. So for instance, I talked about a list, and if there's a clear cutoff that says these 500 homes need service, that's what I want the quote on.
Right.
So I'm concerned about getting a quote before we know what we're asking for a quote on. So.
I think if you look back at what we originally voted on when we authorized money, there was a speed associated with it.
There was, and my concern is I think that it changed. I think the federal
But the speed
government.
was based on the federal rate.
The original
Federal rate
speed was 25.
Yes.
And then they
Jumped to
moved it to
100.
100.
Right.
So I would,
Didn't we address that? I thought we addressed that in council one time, that we're accepting whatever the federal. speed
we
rate
did,
is.
but I'm wondering if the original thing was. The way that we then can determine this, and what you're saying is, yeah, the number is 100. But a house that's getting 95 is not going to get connected faster than the house getting 30. We can stack those the opposite direction.
Well, I think that, I think you're on the same thing, like just like we just need to see a list.
Yeah.
We need to sort it by speed and say, here, we're gonna go anybody this speed and below,
Go now.
that's who we're focusing
Yeah.
on. So maybe the motion is that we do whatever we need to do to get the list and compile it, and then we can.
We
look at
just
that
need
list
a-
and use that as an option to send out the quote. I don't know, need the extra steps, but.
Yes, we will get that list after the NDA is executed. That being said, what the goal was and what the department was looking for today, I just want to make sure we know what this is not a final quote whatsoever. I just want to get a number so we can start understanding what this is going to cost, so we can budget accordingly for the 2024 fiscal year. That's the main thing.
So if we, can we then just put the verbiage in the motion that says we'll get the list, and essentially anybody who's under the federal guidelines is who we would want to initially have considered as a bulk number of the quote? And then we can, obviously, again, we're not getting an RFP out for a specific thing. We're just like, hey, ballpark it. This is about where we want to be. Is everybody okay with that? I'm just trying to find a way to keep this moving forward and not just beat this dead horse for the rest of the night.
I have a question related to that. So does that mean then you're going to go down every address in the city?
So in that case, so we would go down the address list that I provided tonight, but in this case, to look up on the FCC website, every single address, that would be over 11,000 homes. I just don't have time to do that. I did this list, but that's a lot.
Well, I understand that, but given what he just said, I
Yeah.
mean, somebody else hearing that
Oh,
may
no, no.
say, okay, so we're getting internet for everybody and we need to know what their speed is to see who gets first what. So I think we need to be a little bit more clear on that.
So so whenever we get the list from Spectrum, that data, then I can get an Excel and I can play around and compare and make sure duplicates are, what I'll do is then I can compare that data. I won't have to go through every single address. There's conditional formatting within Excel that I can play with to make sure it's done quickly. So yes, we will review each one and compare and contrast, but also we'll include every single address that is under 100 megabits per second, and that'll be included, and I'll make sure to highlight as well.
So Spectrum will give you a list with every
Every address.
speed with every address in the city of Wildwood.
Every address in the city of
Okay,
Wildwood, and
good.
then I'm gonna take that list, you'll almost have like a highlighted copy. If they were on this list and they're also on that list and are 100, then wow, those are priority, because they've said they needed it. And then the second portion there would be individuals under 100 but didn't report. But obviously you'll see the whole list too during hopefully the next meeting.
Maybe dumb question, but is there anybody, I mean, if you can go to a website and you can pull each address individually, it means there's a database of all those addresses, that information. Is there a contact there that you can do like a data request to say like, hey, I need all the data, whether it takes them 2 or 3 days, a week to get it back to you, compile it, whatever. Is there a place to reach out to ask for that?
Yes, I have called the FCC, and that's who you really wanna, just check out their website. It's very interesting, but they said that would take 6 to 7 months.
Federal government.
So yeah, definitely, I was thinking the same thing.
Okay, well, never mind.
Uncle Sam.
So with the motion on the floor, everybody feel comfortable at this point to take a vote on that?
You want to restate it, please?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
you wanna restate it?
He's like, no, I don't actually. Somebody else was gonna restate it.
Yeah,
Parts to this motion.
go ahead.
So
We'll help you
the
out.
first part, I had Jaxie's part of the motion to submit addresses to Spectrum. And then a list back of homes that Spectrum and the city would need connectivity for phase 2. And then city administrator proposed to earmark funds for a consulting firm to bird dog the project and report regularly to the city. Is that part of the motion?
No.
No.
That would be what
that's
we would go.
a
I
whole
think
other
what you
thing.
had for just
Okay.
Councilmember Jaxie's part of it is pretty much the motion.
Do I add anything to that?
I don't think you need to. I think it's.
Good.
You need
All
to-
right. So with that,
So you need to say that he motioned.
what's that?
You need to say that he motioned.
She said that.
Explain, did she say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Councilmember Hopper seconded.
Seconded.
Second, yeah. that's right.
Okay,
All right. All right, all those, so everyone, we've got the motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, that motion passes. Just to be,
I have no comments.
that's it. You're getting too comfortable in the community. room. All right, in order to keep things moving forward here, because, you know, we're having a lot of good discussion here. The next item is about, the potential for an e-recycling event. And I'll just cut to the chase here because some of you may be familiar, we used to hold these events. And, the city administrator provided an update here that there is a grant opportunity that we can get from the county. So pretty straightforward. If we apply for the grant, then it would be similar to what we've done in the past, which is electronics recycling and paper shredding. And you know, very popular with residents. We haven't had one in a while. And it'd be good to try to get that going. So simple request, if that's okay. I think maybe this is simple enough to say motion that would be to submit an application and see what happens.
Yep, that was I am just small comment and then yes, the motion that I hear about this all the time. And everybody talks like, oh, well, the city of Baldwin does, the city also. I always hear about how like, oh, this other city, they do this. When are we doing an EU recycling thing? I hear about this, I feel like almost as much as Old State, which is a lot. So I think this would be like, what, I don't even care if we don't get a grant, if we find a way to fund it otherwise for us to do it as a city, if we do it once a year. But definitely apply for the grant, but I would say even if we don't get the grant, I would say we look at other options to fund it, because it seems like it is a immensely requested.
So I think we try a rolling timeline, so it's not like if
Yeah.
we're waiting till January, we're gonna have more money. I think we try it.
I was just gonna make the motion.
Okay, Nathan, I think you.
I got the motion.
Nathan, seconded by Deborah on the motion to proceed with an application with St. Louis County for an e-cycling and shredding event.
Also, I just wanted to note, I wanted to give kudos to Michelle. She's done a lot of research into this program and she has been pushing the envelope forward. So just wanted to give it a little spotlight.
Excellent. So, all right, motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, the motion passes. All right, the next item, you know, and I would say maybe we could get a motion, maybe to just defer that to the end, and if we have time, we will have it, but just to bring it up, it is that time of the year where we do performance evaluations, but also something that this committee worked on during the city administrator search process was noted that we wanted to make sure that as part of the onboarding for the new city administrator, that we would provide good feedback ongoing so that your onboarding can be successful. So I think all depending on the timing, that would be because it is a performance item here. It is something that qualifies under a closed meeting, which is RSMO 610-021, section 13. But I don't think, I'd rather get through all those items and then see where we are if we have time. So with that, a motion to just move this to the end of the agenda, and then we'll evaluate. Made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Nathan there, Councilmember Hopper. I need to just be consistent. Gonna go with first name. Forget.
Okay, I'm good.
All right, Nathan and Joe. So motion made by Joe, second by Nathan to rearrange the order of the agenda. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstain? All right, motion was voted. All right, next, Public Works, under for information, number one, we have the update on the waste hauler transition. So we'll hand that over to the city administrator.
Thank you, Chair Garitano. So just wanted to give you a quick update. The two new waste haulers, we've received very few actual complaints. I think service has been generally pretty good. You know, I don't know what you've all been hearing, but typically, you know, one thing here or there, but that's to be expected with 35,000 residents, 12,000 homes. That being said as well, we are excited to announce here that both haulers have pretty much, you know, they've done damage on clearing those old carts. So Chuck with Gateway, they actually came out last week and had Rurik Pacific come out. We did a mailer. We had it on our e-newsletter. We did a special e-newsletter. You have a alert on our website right now. Top of it, we have 4 different places on the website where you can find it. We did social media posts 3 times. We also contacted the individuals that signed up with the request form, the removal request form. We emailed them twice as well to just ensure that they put them out, and they collected over 1,500 carts last week. So great news in the Gateway area. We think that should cover most of it, and now Chuck will be kind of handling back to a bulk item one-off situation. That being said, with the recycling, with Republic has been on your typical collection day. They've been picking up extra carts and old carts daily. They've removed a significant portion, somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000 so far. There are still some out there, but they will continue to pick them up each and every day until it is done. Overall, I would say the implementation and the transition has been very successful at this point because the customer service has been very, very good for them. I mean, it just, we have not been getting too many complaints as of now. Things have died down. We do feel as if, and Mr. Brown can speak to this as well, but we do feel like we're turning a page here and we're looking forward to expanding on this partnership with our new haulers, and we look forward to carrying out the relationship.
Yes, I just wanted to, this situation has been resolved, but, originally we wanted Republic to take away the trash cans that were left over, Meridian ones that Waste Connections didn't. The solution they offered was a bulk pickup item. They later offered to take them if the sign remove was placed on them, which I appreciated. That was the goal. What happened is we kind of created a communication kerfuffle because we told our residents one thing and then later we had an improved situation. Just so you know, from our end, I had a resident, a neighbor actually, that called Republic to schedule the bulk pickup item. So this was before we were even told it was a possibility to use the remove sign. They were told by Republic, put the remove sign on the golf cart. You don't need a bulk pickup item. Again, opposite of what I'm telling my residents. He then does that and then it never gets picked up multiple weeks in a row. Then he calls back, then they're like, well, we're actually doing that now. Then the drivers were told to do that and then his cart got picked up. But it added to the frustration. And then the other, we go through this with every single issue. Because we try to communicate with the tools that we have. And sometimes it's enough and sometimes it's not enough. And we've got a group of residents that, like, let's say their power goes out. Instead of calling Ameren to report that, they go on to Nextdoor and they say, hey, my power is out. What should I do about it? And is your power out? And when do you think it's going to be back on? That they go to that source. They go to their neighbors and a rumor mill online, which usually ends in name calling of one another. I'm not really sure why, instead of calling the direct source. And we need to find a way to reach those residents. And what I'm seeing is that we haven't done it. So you've heard from one resident of mine that's complained, that's upset, but I have another group of residents that have been contacting me as well. I had a neighbor that showed up at 9 o'clock at night one night, just because he wanted to talk about the trash situation. So I'm getting it. I'm getting it just as much as you are. And what I have found is that a couple things happen. One, they don't know what the current process is. I think we're past that now. They now don't have their trash cans. But the biggest thing is they had sticker price shock because they don't know how we got to that decision, when we got to that decision, and how they were supposed to know about it, even though it was on our website. So what would help me is if Director Brown or City Administrator Lee, if you could walk through in a soundbite for my residents that are asking this, and I've tried to explain the narrative and explain to them the timeline, how we had a notice to vacate, why we were so rushed, because as I have tried to explain, while you may think you can have a contract a month before service starts, that's not enough time to go out to market. Our vendors told us that. I need that explained again, tonight. And I need them to understand how we are empowered legally to use quality of service, as an explanation, because having that conversation at 9 o'clock at night in a bathrobe is not ideal. And I know this is the second time I brought up the MML, but I was listening to a lecture from them for a certification. And there was this quote, and I took a picture of the screen because I thought, oh my God, this is the situation. Because the quote is, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And that's from Bernard Shaw. And I thought, oh my God, that is the situation in a nutshell. So can you kind of run that down for me?
Yeah.
Again,
Just kind of on a piece of that too. Yeah, I think definitely that's where the biggest issue, and I think the points where people are frustrated about the cans and all that stuff, but I think ultimately the biggest frustration, that kind of the root cause that fed underneath that is that it became sort of this like nobody knew what happened and when, and then all of a sudden it was like, everybody's getting new carts and you gotta do all this stuff, and I was like, I don't understand, and then it opened up doors for a lot of comment online and in meetings of like, well, you're violating the law, you're doing this, not really knowing that, like, nobody really knows what the process was that happened, and then to be quite honest, to be getting really pressed from a resident, I'm sitting there going like, I don't know, well, did we do that? I don't remember, did we? And so now I'm like, I feel a little unsure about answering this question for you, because I don't want to say anything and then have it blow up. So yeah, I think just having a sort of narrative that says, this is where we started with Waste Connections saying, we're done. And then it moved to, okay, we did this, this is why we made this. So I don't know if it's just like a thing tonight or just like a memo that goes out and says, this is the process that we followed and why.
Yes.
And just having that to be able to provide to a resident and say, here, this is your story and the narrative that you need that says this is the timeline that happened.
I would suggest, there was a memorandum that was provided to the Emmett Public Works Committee earlier this year, I believe it was April, that provides a good update on what took place. And the city has a whole dedicated webpage that gets into the pricing and why. But I think those have been good sources from folks that have read it, that have felt like, okay, I get it. But if folks aren't going out there reading it, sometimes folks receive their information different ways. So I think we've got some good lessons learned about, maybe communicating, that maybe over communicating is not a bad thing either. But city administrator, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was gonna say that this would be best, just a heads up too, the city followed its code and spoke with its city attorney to follow said code every single step of the way. There was not one thing here that was not following the code, and there was an emergency in this situation. We had a situation where we would not have trash picked up unless we acted. In this case, I think the best path forward would be our city attorney put together a timeline in a memorandum format and have that sent out to the committee members. Just to make sure that we get every step of it down, because I will say, and I think Director of Public Works Brown here, every single minute, any decision that was made was spoken with our city attorney, and we ensure that each and every moment we had there, we referred back to the code and make sure it was good.
but
Yeah, and I don't doubt that at all. Like, I know as we were going through the process, I'm sure we were all thinking of like, are we good here? Like I said, it's just hard. If the last memo is in April, it is now September, and trying to remember, wait, what happened in April? So was it March? Like, so yes, I think just having something that was a good timeline, said this is where we did this is why, this is the code we followed. And also having it as the ability to be public facing. So quite honestly, if we see people on social media and they're blowing up like, here, boom, this is the timeline, this will give you your narrative of what you need to
Yes,
know.
the same way.
And I would just love to be able to have something, and then all of us as a group have a consistent thing to put and say, this is what we're all putting out there and saying, this is what happened. And not like, I remember this, and then, I don't know if Joe gets on Facebook or not, but he replies to a couple people and they're like, well, that's not what I think somebody else did. Word 7 said, so just my thought.
Well, and just to finish up exactly what he said, don't just send it to us, because think of it like a press release, right?
Yeah.
Something that is gonna go out that's front facing. Because the other issue that I'm having is, in my mind, there is a clear outline of what happened. But everything was a bit of a blur, and that I can't remember what was told to me specifically in closed session that I wasn't allowed to repeat and what wasn't. And I think what has happened is we've had discussions about, legality, and we did everything right. And then when we all left the room and we all left the closed room feeling comfortable with that decision, and then we voted and there was no really front facing explanation. And that's, I think, where everything fell through the cracks. And so I'm still not clear on what I can say and what I can't say of what I do know. And so if you guys can help me with that, give that to the residents, that's tremendous, because we are used to not being in this situation. We've never had one bidder, and we've never had one bidder that didn't meet the bid specs. We are used to picking an RFP award winner, announcing that relationship, starting the communication process, starting the transition. And all of this happened together. It was a scramble to figure out a different relationship while transitioning, while communicating that we're in this, while ironing it all out. And that's where it just turned into just this bad soup. And all of this is why we're trying to get responses for other people. They have bosses to talk to, they have attorneys to talk to. There's days of lagging that we're not responsible for. So when somebody asks me, why, well, if everything's such a hurry, then why did it take a while between you guys signing a contract and voting on it or something like that? I don't have a really great answer other than it was probably administrative. But I'd like to be able to answer that.
I think, according to the city administrator, he's gonna ask the city attorney to write something. Joe, you had a comment there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm a big fan of over communication. I think it's great, but what I have said consistently when I've addressed many people at other boards about this. We have a subset of people in our community. We had a gentleman who visited us today. He visited us at the last council meeting who feels very strongly this way. There's a subset of our community that believes regardless of what the bid is asking for, if it is a lower cost, that is what we should select. Myself, I can only speak for me on this. I believe that I am elected by my residents to look at all of the options, not just cost. If it's the lowest cost and the best bid, awesome. It almost never is. So we have to look at things as terms of what is the right thing for our city. And so we were put into several bad situations with the trash thing that were outside of really all of our control. We need to talk to our city attorney less about give us the thing that happened and more about what is it that we are okay to say. Because the people that are upset about this are not going to believe what John says. They're not going to believe what Jim says. They're not going to believe probably what any of us say. Because they have a narrative that they've constructed in their head that something nefarious went on here. And so all we can do is to say, look, we were provided, we asked for this information, we got information back. I voted myself in the best interest of the citizens that I represent. If they don't like that opinion, that is unfortunate. We can all be replaced every 2 years. If somebody wants to run against me because they're upset about the trash, I'm all for it. I would love to have that conversation because I am incredibly confident that we went through every step. We talked about this literally ad nauseum, how this was going to go on. We talked about it when our former trash partners came to us and revealed that they weren't great partners to begin with and have successfully demonstrated that every step of the way out of this city. So I am all for getting a timeline together and sharing as much information as possible. But the truth is the people that are the most vocal about this, it will not matter what we tell them. They have a narrative built.
If I can just, to a little bit of response to that, those people are those people, right? Like they're never gonna change.
Yep.
The problem is the sphere of influence when we don't have a good response. Right? So I think in this situation, I don't think anybody did anything wrong. I think everybody did the absolute best job that they could do in the situation. We got dealt like 4 or 5 really crappy situations all at once. And it was juggling all that. I mean, again, high praise to Rick and Tom and everybody who went through and navigated that entire situation because it was not a basket of fruit that I handed to you for that. So, but again, I think it's just more of, yes, those people are gonna do it. They're extremely loud in social media and stuff like that. Right now, we just don't have a clear cut thing to say like, oh, you can say whatever you want to, here's what happened. And then it just dissipates. All the other people who are unsure, they're like, oh, well, crap, well, they provided this. And if it's just
And there are a number of those, there are a number of those things. For a long time, in my estimation with the city, even prior to me being on the council, there's a theory to not speak to any of those things, to not give those people an expanded voice. I am telling you, as a communication expert, that does not work. And it plays out over and over. We get people that come to the council that are concerned about things that have been conflated for them, that do not exist. And it can become quickly a very borderline dangerous situation. We got people showing up at 9 o'clock. I got people stopping me on my way to take my kids to school. Like, I'm happy to talk to people, but like, it's not fun when they're aggressive about something that they don't even understand.
I think,
welcome talking with that much at all. There you go.
I was just gonna say that the point is, we could have done a better job, live and learn. We have the ability to do a little bit better now, and it's not a criticism of you two in the room. I don't mean it like that. You're also dealing with coming in as a new administrator, and you were dealt with certain cards. And we appreciate you playing with the cards that you were dealt. I would rather err on, our job is to be honest and open with our residents. And if somebody wants to try to do something wrong with that, then they're going to, no matter what. But if we, our job is to minimize risk and liability, and I understand that. But if you overcorrect on that, you end up not communicating at all. Cities will always get sued. It will happen. If we feel that we can defend it in court, that's what we'll do. But we can't not communicate or answer basic questions, because it will create a self-fulfilling prophecy where people will say, the city's not answering my questions and the smell's wrong. It doesn't pass the smell test. And so I'm going to jump on this thought bandwagon, and I'm on the front lines right now. And that's exactly what I'm seeing. So let's minimize the bleeding and explain ourselves a little bit better, because I believe that we have the ability to do that, and we owe that to our residents, because it's what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I think we're got good consensus here. I'll just express some opinion here, as someone who's been here for a while, is that it's important to state the facts and be truthful. And I think our council members do a very good job in doing that. But it's also very important that then when there is a misinformation, we have an obligation to correct that. We have to make sure that our residents understand what is important, and step in when you have to do that. So I think this is a situation where, residents that do understand and are aware of our process and how we went about it. I think our residents are very understanding about that. And those that learn about it then understand it as well. So I think with that, we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but I feel very good and confident in the process that we followed. And, we have made the best decision for our residents, given the circumstances that we had. So with that, we will proceed. Oh, Councilmember Clark. Yeah, sorry, thank you for that. Again, my back is to the screen, Councilmember Clark, so I can't see it. Raise your hand.
I thought you were just trying to ignore me tonight. No, I agree. We have to communicate what our position is and why we did what we did. But we are doing that. We've done it on the website. We do it when we answer. We try to answer logical emails with logical answers and just state facts, and maybe have a memorandum will help us to be able to do that. I just personally, and maybe it's because I'm old, I do not want to get involved with the comments on social media or giving answers to these, because the handful of people that are doing that, I think our residents are smart enough to see that a handful of people will be the ones that find a complaint about anything. And there are some that are legitimate complaints, but then there's the ones that I'm not going to get involved with trying to explain myself, because, over the years, I found that just gets you into more trouble, because it will be taken and twisted into another agenda. So I would say that, I guess my advice from experience is to not get involved with that, trying to explain on a soapbox, but to give our explanation out there and refer to that and let them look at that and then be done with it. I get involved myself with emails and trying to answer questions. And then there comes a point where the questions keep coming back to you from the same people that you've answered, but they don't like the answer. So there comes a point that you can't keep trying to explain something that you've already explained. So I would say, communication and over communication is great, but you have to have a line that you draw.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark. All right, well, I don't see anyone else's hand up, so we'll continue to proceed here and appreciate everyone being here tonight. It's a long meeting, but important work getting done here. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the update of the Route 100 J-turn improvement project. I'm going to assume, Rick, you've been silent, so it's your turn.
Saving my voice.
Well rested.
Yeah, well rested. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Dan's putting up some of the information on the screen for y'all. Wanted to give you an update on this project. It's kind of unique. I think you're aware we've been working on it for a bit, and we've gotten federal and state funding to help fund this improvement project. Now, this is the J-turn improvement project on Route 100. So it will improve, it's proposed to improve the intersections of Route 100 and Pond and Route 100 at T or St. Albans Road. So initially MoDOT had done a study that came out with the original recommendation to install J-turns at both these intersections. And essentially that was a recommendation that would be implemented in lieu of traffic signals, which is the common request from residents, that they like to see some improvement there to improve the safety. So we hired our consultant, George Butler Associates, to essentially start the first step of the design process, which was complete a conceptual study and traffic analysis of the J-turns. And so they have done some additional work and presented to us a full report that I provided in my memorandum. It's pretty lengthy, but I wanted to present it to you and provide opportunity for you all to give us any feedback or comment on the project at this time. Our plan essentially is to try to move it forward and start some public involvement and so getting to stakeholders and maybe having a public meeting with residents regarding this project. So this is kind of I envision this as kind of the first step in that process. So the J-turns that are being proposed are similar, but not exactly the same as what was recommended through MoDOT. And there was a couple of major changes that I wanted to point out. And Ms. Clark, I know that she lives near Wild Horse Creek Road, and one of them affects the intersection of Wild Horse Creek Road. So I wanted to point that one out. So at Route T, with the J-turn project, it will eliminate the ability to go through or turn left on the side road or from the side road. So if you are turning left from Route T to go east on 100, you're going to go right instead, and you're going to make a U-turn, right? So that's the J-turn. Now, if you're coming the other way from St. Albans Road, as Dan's trying to hopefully point out, you're going to go right. And then you're gonna make a left by using a U-turn loop at Wild Horse Creek Road. Now, what this consultant is proposing is to essentially modify the crossover at Wild Horse Creek Road and make that into a J-turn. So the folks at Wild Horse Creek Road will also be affected. So if you're coming out of Wild Horse Creek Road and you want to make a left, you're gonna have to go right down past St. Albans Road or Route T and use the J-turn to come back. So, Ms. Clark, I know we've had some discussions about this very thing, I believe. So that is actually what the consultant recommended, is that we would include Wild Horse Creek Road into the J-turn essentially. So those left turners from Wild Horse would have to go right, go down past St. Albans Road, use the J-turn and come back. So that's a big change from what was originally envisioned with the project, but I think it would be, from a safety standpoint, preferred. So that was the one big change at St. Albans Road. If you'd like, we'll go down to Pond Road and I can kind of try to talk you through it as best I can. Well, before we do that, so. Oh, sorry, I didn't know what over you. That's okay. If you want to leave it, we'll talk about this too. So with the study, I think it was referenced in my memorandum, we had the consultant also look at roundabouts. So they did draw up a concept to install a roundabout at Route T and at Pond Road as well. So we have that concept that has been developed and a rough cost estimate completed, and it was also evaluated and compared and contrasted with the J-turn at either Route T or Pond Road. So that was part of the work that was done by the consultant as well. And so this is the roundabout that has been drawn up for Route T. So, and then this is the roundabout that was drawn up for Pond Road, right, Dan? Yeah, Pond Road. But I wanted to go to the next J-turn at Pond, yeah. So at Pond Road, this is on the west side of the intersection is pretty much the same concept. There's a J-turn loop to the west of Pond Road. If you're on Pond Road, you won't be able to go straight through, or you won't be able to make a left turn. You have to use that J-turn to the west. Now, the change that was made or has been recommended at Pond Road is the addition of a J-turn to the east of Pond Road. So previously, MoDOT study had recommended that traffic that was coming from Pond Road going northbound, not southbound, but northbound. They would make a right, go eastbound on Route 100 and utilize the 100 to 109 interchange to make that U-turn movement. So this would eliminate the need to do that. We would construct a J-turn essentially at Community Park at that existing location where we access Community Park on the eastbound, the westbound 100 lane. That's where the J-turn would be constructed. So that's the major change at that end. So I think overall, I think that's a lot better improvement from a traffic standpoint. It reduces a lot of the adverse travel that was being required with the prior concept by going in this route, by adding the additional J-turn at that location. So those are the two major changes that I wanted to point out that have come out of the study to date. Again, we did have roundabouts drawn up and evaluated. The consultant compared and contrast the relative benefits for both improvements. And at the final analysis is they are still recommending moving forward with the J-turn improvements at this location. And that's what we intend to take forward and start to communicate that with stakeholders. And then we do hope to have an open house public meeting, probably sometime in October. Dan, I don't know if we actually set the date just yet, but probably mid-October if we can do it around the budgeting season. So with that, I'll certainly take any questions you have at this point.
Deborah?
So Rick, how does that flow with our other two J-turns that we're already in the process with? Are those going to work well together?
I'm not sure I'm following you exactly there, council member.
Well, haven't we already approved a J-turn at, what is it? Hawks Rest and what other street was it?
So the additional project we're working on is the left turn lane improvement project. So it's not J turns, they're traditional left turn lanes, but those will be going on the 2-lane section west of Route 100.
So I'm just thinking more about the Pond Road one because I've done that intersection a lot. Like all of the buses come through there. I'm just wondering, I mean, we're gonna have buses come down, make this loop. Those cars are not moving slowly at that point, and they're gonna have to cross multiple lanes of traffic. It just, I mean, I'm happy to defer to the experts as to what the best decision on this is, but that seems, I mean, that intersection during school days backs up pretty good amount, and like, I'm pretty sure, though there are a few buses remaining in Rockwood in this part of town, they're all coming down that road. Because
They would have to
They're
cross
parked
those lanes of
right there.
traffic anyway if they're gonna turn left.
Well, I know, but I mean, if they're coming back in, like, I'm talking about when they're trying to make the swing back in with kids to get into elementary school and the middle school and stuff. Cause those cars that are coming down, I mean, you gotta like clench your teeth and hit the gas to get across that, no matter what's happening. So I don't know how those buses do it now. But making that, I mean, the turn, there's no signage, right? You're going down and you're making the turn and you're kind of swooping and going, right? You're merging into full speed traffic at that point.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
You would, when you merge over one lane, of course, you're gonna decelerate to use the J turn and you're obviously you're gonna yield to any oncoming traffic, but.
Right.
So when you have a gap, you'll make the U-turn and then accelerate.
Can I ask a question on your question? Just
Yeah.
to clarify. So just clarify what you're saying. I may have been thinking the wrong thing. So you're talking down here, farther left on that J turn
Right.
when because they have to cross and then enter to the left, right? Like, so they're gonna have to J turn, come around the way you have that written out. Is it okay if I get up and walk up to the screen at that point? Sure. Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, but like, so up here, just the way it's drawn out is that they come through the J turn. They cross both lanes of traffic to get in another lane on the right and then enter that way? Is that what's?
They would use that to accelerate, yes, and then to merge back in.
So.
That's correct.
Then they're crossing, now I see so then they're crossing those two lanes of traffic again. Why wouldn't they come in on the left side of the road and then merge right where they're not crossing traffic?
But it also seems to me like they now have an opportunity to get T-boned and rear-ended all at the same time.
I mean, if you're gonna smorgasbord it, you might as well just.
Right.
So the reason they're that big is for the ability for trucks to make the movement. The larger vehicles need that larger radius, frankly. So that doesn't mean a passenger car, if there's no oncoming traffic, they very well may make the loop and just merge right into the whichever lane works for them. So I wouldn't say that most vehicles frankly would probably use the full acceleration lane. But I think when you're doing it, you're doing that with the assumption that you have a suitable gap in traffic to make the movement and accelerate into traffic. Now, so part of this study was a micro simulation model that we use as traffic engineers to provide us data that supports the ability for traffic flow, demonstrate that the traffic does operate adequately. Essentially, that model is intended to show with the proper parameters set and the traffic flow being accurately modeled that buses in the morning peak hour can adequately merge over, utilize gaps in the traffic flow and safely decelerate to a J turn and make those movements. The point being, this is a key, and you've hit on something with the school district that we intend to address with them directly. And I hope to use that model and the results from that model to say, look, we're very comfortable it can work, and I'm going to lean on my consultant to prove that to us. And I frankly need to drill down with them a little bit further on this very issue. And we're planning a meeting with them hopefully this week yet to talk more about this very thing. So I think there's more work to be done there. If we by any stretch feel that they can't make that movement, we're not gonna recommend this any further, frankly. But I think they're a key stakeholder.
I mean, for cars, I don't think it's a big deal at all, but I do know at intersection, like, you're gonna probably start having buses now lining up in one direction. So they're coming from a dead stop, making a turn across traffic and trying to accelerate. I don't know, I mean, twice. And I mean, I'm thankful that we have any bus drivers left, but I'm not certain that these people are like, you know, the most world-class bus drivers in the world that are used to that kind of thing. So I'm just, it's more of a bus thing for me than anything. I mean, there absolutely needs to be something done at that intersection because I did it for years and it's like taking your life in your hands every single time you do it. But I look at that and I don't know that I see my mom, who's like the average age of all those bus drivers, doing that well.
Well, and I think just even that too, because, you know, yeah, because they're realistically gonna come out and make a right. They have to merge left over 2 lanes to get to the J turn. And they have to cross both those other lanes to turn around and get back in the accelerate. I mean, now we've gone from essentially crossing 2 lanes of traffic where they just cross in the middle and turn left and be right on that left-hand side. Where now they have to cross 4 lanes of traffic. So we're kind of almost doubling what they have to try to do to get past.
I mean, how are you guys?
I mean, I'm not an engineer by any means, and it's just a concern that I have about it. The design of it.
Teresa, do you have your hand up?
I do. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Rick, I've looked through this as well and I read the manual. And I do agree that this is I like this plan better than the MoDOT plan. I always prefer merging traffic rather than crossover traffic. And what you've got here is mostly merging. And when from the Pond Road itself, there does look like a little bit of concern after the bus, a big vehicle would make the turn to go in all the way to the right-hand lane. I've not seen that done before, but living in Michigan for a while, these are Michigan turns and this flows the traffic much better than any at all the intersections in town in Detroit area have these J turns, or we call them Michigan lefts. And they make the traffic move much smoother and less accidents. And that I like so much. But why don't we go to the bus garage and ask some of the bus drivers to come in and give us their opinion? Do they think this works for them as well? And just to get some opinions on how they think they could, they know their buses better than any of us do.
That's actually a good point, Councilmember, because on Route 94, there's a J turn that's been installed between Mid Rivers Mall and some of you may have seen it and I-64. And I don't know if they would send a driver out there to drive that, but that might not be a bad approach.
Let's see, any more input for Rick?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just bouncing off the communication quote I shared earlier. Here's a thought, and I'm basing this off a story in a small town, in a rural state, in a very rural town. And it was local news on the TV because they got a roundabout and they had to do a public service announcement about how to maneuver the roundabout because none of them had ever seen it before. And if it was on their driver's test, it was many years ago. My thought would be, because yes, maybe the bus drivers are trained, we are still going to have drivers that don't know what a J turn is or panic when they see it. I have been in the car with someone that is Missouri and previously an Illinois driver that had never seen a 2-lane roundabout and panicked at the one in Wildwood. So what I would think would be judicious would be to, besides reaching out to those drivers, is when that opens, that we have produced a video that we have on our website about how to maneuver one. Okay. And then we do either a press release or we invite the local news and we do a news story area wide about an expansion on Route 100 and how to drive the turns. And I've seen it in other areas. They have those types of news stories. It would be helpful because we're also going to have drivers that don't live in Wildwood. So just doing it about in Wildwood isn't going to fix the problem. It needs to be area wide. So we just need that ready to go from the moment that is opened, if this is what we go with.
We had one of those when the first round of events came in the city. It was on the
We did,
website.
okay.
There's been some stuff done.
So more than just the website is what I'm talking about.
And just
Local
social
news.
media, well, yeah, if we can get news.
But no, certainly.
I mean, this is a highway. This is a MoDOT highway. We sure can.
All right, keep us moving forward here, because I know it's getting late for some of you. Rick, I think you've got some feedback, so you're good there. This
Hey,
is a-
Joe,
Yes, oh, sorry about that. Go ahead.
thank you. For Mr. Brown as well, I forgot to mention that the crossover at Wild Horse Creek, yes, I think that that change also will cause a lot less potential and accidents. And that kind of plays on what Lauren was just talking about, that people don't know how to use it. They don't know how to use crossovers now. So no one has been trained on that. So if we change it and we get information out there, I think it's going to be a lot better than what we've got right now, especially at the Wild Horse Creek Road crossover, because there's no lanes designated where you're supposed to be. And sometimes you can get like 3 cars tandem trying to turn eastbound on 100. And it just causes a lot of confusion. So I think if we've got something like this, we'll have lines painted, we'll have it set up. And if we do all of the education, it's going to be better than what it is now.
Rick, have you start working too on a divergent diamond? How about that one? That is a pretty cool intersection. I think of it right in Concord. Just kidding. All right, I think a lot of good discussion here, so that's good there. The next item, I think Rick already mentioned, the intent of the town center maintenance items was where Rick talked about whether some things fall under the city or the CID. And I'm not gonna spend more time on that, because one of the things that I talked with Thomas about, and we hope to do this soon, is to do kind of a site visit around town center. And it would be timely when the city has the golf carts around, so that we can use those to get out there. So plan for a field trip coming soon, just to kind of be able to get to see things in person. And we can talk more about what Rick was alluding to, what city maintenance items versus CID, and some of those are personal property items too.
One quick thing, if I can mention it too, just to keep in mind, we do have our Taylor Road in Manchester Road resurfacing project coming up. It's probably going to be next year at this point, because we're still getting the easements for that. So that's going to do a lot of stuff to improve Taylor Road. So there are things that could be done now, frankly, that you might notice on Taylor Road, say it's going to be done on that project. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that there may be some things that we're not doing that need to be done, and we know it needs to be done, but it's scheduled to be done with that project.
So that stuff you can call out when we get out there and see some of that stuff, because yeah, Taylor Road got its fair share of traffic, and curbs show that, especially on
Those
Taylor.
curb repairs, things like that.
And just an FYI for that, if we really were wanting to do that with the golf carts, it would need to be done on the 22nd, the Friday before. Or Celebrate Wildwood, that's when we get them delivered. Some people will be, as long as we can double up, we should be fine, but we'd all need to carve out a little bit of time during the day on that Friday. On the 22nd.
Okay, so maybe we'll figure out the logistics on how we can do
I can
that.
send out an email for sure.
Okay, then moving on, we'll get into for action. We've got a couple of items here. So Rick, I'm gonna keep moving forward, but you know, given the lateness of the hour, if there is anything at all that you think can be postponed, but I'm thinking we can move pretty quickly through these items here. So the first item is the proposed future capital improvement project to address groundwater in Crown Point Estates.
Honestly, that could probably be postponed if you like. Although it's not, I don't see it as being super controversial or challenging to consider, but I would be not opposed to postponing that if that's what you'd like to do. I had this conversation with one of the trustees. They don't see them, that they showed up this meeting, obviously, so that might allow them an opportunity to go up next meeting.
Does that, everyone feel good about postponing that to the next meeting?
This is your ward, are you okay with that? If not, I'll move.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an issue that, been an issue that's been going on for quite some time. In this case, they did contact Rick directly. Maybe Councilmember Galani, that's his subdivision, probably knows more about it, but, want to just postpone it to the next meeting, that's fine.
Can I postpone? And then also, I just have a question. What happens if the design includes permeable pavement? I know it doesn't look cohesive, but does the ability of water runoff to go through the concrete help address 50% of the problem? 10%, 100%? Just be curious.
Well, actually, Dan and I have been talking about that, and it may be something that we want to take a close look at potentially when we do that project. We essentially re-pour the sidewalks as permeable. That's a tool. I'd like to think that's a tool in our toolbox that we could use. So it's something I think we definitely.
All right, Councilmember Clark, we're gonna postpone the item, or do you want to mention something now?
I was gonna second the motion if that was a motion made by Lauren.
All right, Lauren, and then seconded by Councilmember Clark, will postpone to the next meeting. Is everyone good with that? All right, all those in favor of postponement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstain? All right, we will postpone to the next meeting. That'll give the HOA an opportunity to attend. All right, next is the street acceptance of New College Avenue and West Avenue. Rick, this should be an easy one.
Well, actually, council member and.
I didn't see it. I thought this was
Gonna be a minute.
Could be an easy one to postpone or an easy one to.
Up to you. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna ask to postpone it, quite frankly, because I didn't have time to really do my homework there and.
Perfect, you've got a break.
Yeah.
All right. Made motion by Nathan, seconded by Joe, postponement to the next meeting. Right, that's good. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We oppose or abstain, all right, motion is postponed to the next meeting. All right, next one, I know this one, desperate for something on Center Avenue. So Rick, what do you think there? This an easy one to do?
Well, it might be,
I think Councilmember Clark's been on Center Avenue there. It's,
Love your optimism.
it's a rough road
Yes.
and desperately needs help.
it desperately needs some help. Center Avenue is a private street that we have taken over. And I think with that, the expectation is we would improve it. We do have a project that we're working on. It's under design. But my expectation at this point is that project's not going to be as quick as we'd like it to be. And this was an alternative that I felt like if we could get in there and just do a quick overlay, it would improve it tremendously for the residents. It would make it easier to snow plow in the winter time. Even it's so rough, it's just difficult to even do that. So that was the thought, if we would have, and let's do the work essentially as a change order to the existing project we completed this year. And I'll be honest with you, I don't have a firm commitment from them of doing it this fall, but that's my intent, is that if we move forward, we want it done this fall before the winter time, so that we have it in place before the winter.
All right, Joe,
Motion.
you want to make a motion?
I'll make
All
a
right, Lauren, then I'll let you do a second. Their motion, you go ahead. Rick, is that to go ahead and approve the change order?
Yeah, that'd be-
All right, so Michelle, you got that, complete a change order for Center Avenue. Motion's on the floor. Any discussion? So seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstained? All right, we're moving on. Next item, the consideration of future rapid flashing beacon installations at crosswalks.
So council members, what I did on this issue, and I know there's maybe a desire to talk specifically about Crestwood Place potentially. But I was under the impression that there was a desire to have a more objective manner to evaluate future requests for the use of rapid flashing angular beacons at crosswalks. So primarily, if you read the memo, I tried to, this took a fair amount of brain power, to be honest, so it's why it took a bit to get to you, but tried to come up with a methodology to kind of objectively evaluate locations, and I put that in a policy for your initial review and comment. So I was really wanting to get some feedback with regard to this approach. Tonight, I can go through it in detail if you'd like. Don't know that you need to act on it tonight necessarily. I'm going to have it in front of Board of Public Safety on Thursday night as well. You want to take a month to review it, consider it. Have it on the agenda for next month, that would be fine as well. Really open to any questions. Again, I have tried to do this in an objective manner. I've got 8 categories of essentially that you score. The higher the score, the more warranted the location would be. Tried to kind of use a few crosswalks as examples, and generally, I think when I went through it, I felt a score of 5 or higher would be considered a warranted location for the use of the beacons. I think most locations that are on a higher speed roadway, probably a Strucker Road, are going to be warranted. Right? Where ones that would not be warranted likely would be a residential street where there's no trail connection, no strong need for one, maybe that, there's no park there, there's no high-speed traffic. And I should preface it to say that if we had a location where there was a clear crash history, that would automatically be warranted. And that's kind of the first thing I should say, frankly. If there was an incident or any reason to believe that there was a direct crash history, that would spur the conclusion that the location was warranted. So other than that, I think I'll close with that. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Okay, yeah, feedback.
Yeah, I had requested that this item, and more specifically that Crosswalk be put back on. So I have had a couple of complaints, and then this has been many months before this has been followed up on again. So for them, they're not going to want a delay about an answer again. So what happened, and I know because you just joined the committee, but we added the 2 crosswalk beacons on Strucker farther up, and those were 2 out of the 3 original proposed locations that had already been funded for the Strucker sidewalk expansion. And for closed session reasons, we can't do the sidewalk, but we could go ahead and do an improved pedestrian safety improvement. And so we did 2 out of the 3, but then we got really requests that, hey, go ahead and do that 3rd one too, please. And so since it's already been budgeted and it was part of the original design plan, I'd like to go ahead and move forward with that, because by having a crosswalk that people feel is unsafe, it's like the city's stamp of approval to use it. Even though you can maybe go ahead and walk farther and cross at Strucker and Clayton, we're still saying, hey, we provided for you this for you, feel free, use this. We think it's safe. But what residents are saying is, I don't feel safe. Director Brown, I think you did a great job putting this checklist together. My only question, and I don't have a better suggestion, I just have a thought, which is probably very annoying to hear, but in terms of pedestrian volume, how do we get a good sense of whether or not this number tells us anything? And I say that because maybe the only reason we have less than 12 people per day in category A, or the only reason we get people in category B of 12 to 50 is because they feel so unsafe they refuse to use it. So how do we actually know that if it wasn't safer, that we wouldn't have a much higher volume as opposed to just somewhere that there's not a lot of people that use it? And I don't have a great way to measure that, just that it might not need to be weighted as high, or maybe it's about, is it on the path to a school? Is it around a lot of homes as opposed to 5 homes? Because we know that if there's only 3 people crossing, it's because there's only 5 homes, not that a bunch of people don't feel safe. So I don't know if there's like an asterisk we can put on that number when we count it.
Well, I think that's exactly why I created the 8 criteria, because I wanted to recognize that fact, frankly. It's not strictly about pedestrian volume that's used in the crosswalk, but I would preface it by saying that, if the crosswalk is there, we've done a study. Presumably, there has been some analysis done to say if it's safe or not to cross at that location. So if it's not safe, it's truly not safe. Then we shouldn't have a crosswalk there, frankly, and that should be probably considered, but that's a large part why the 8 criteria are in there. There's the traffic volume, pedestrian volume, the traffic speed aspect of it as well. Will all play into that decision as to whether it's considered warranted. I would say too, though, that there might be some confusion over that original study that we did for the sidewalks on Strucker. The plan that we brought to the public meeting had a crosswalk, a flashing beacon at Turnberry, I believe. I don't know that it was Presswood Place, but I guess my point would be if we move forward with Presswood, we probably should move forward with one at Turnberry
At the same time.
at the same time, because I think that one would be likely requested shortly thereafter.
Okay, so I'd like, since this is for action, and as you've discussed, that because of the road that they're on, that they would meet the checklist of this category system if this was adopted. I'm gonna do 2 things. I'm gonna make a motion that includes moving forward with Prestwick and Turnberry to council for lighted. And number 3, to adopt your new criteria plan for future considerations.
But I think too, you want to make sure like the funding for Prestwick and Turnberry is coming specifically from that funding bucket.
My understanding is that it is.
Yeah, because that way then you're making that decision that you're gonna use that money that was allocated for
Correct.
Strecker for those crosswalks.
Yes.
Then at that point.
Yes,
Yeah.
do,
Separate, what's that?
separate,
Do them as
separate.
2 separate.
Separate motions?
Okay, that's fine. So I'll make the first motion and then after you vote on that, then I'll come back and do the second.
All right. So, do you want to
Can
go
I ask
ahead,
a
make that
question?
motion?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna make the motion. I just have a real quick question. So, Rick, is the intention, I think the scoring thing is great. Is the intention to score all of the places we think are necessary, or are we waiting for people to ask us to score them?
I don't think the intent was to go literally look for locations necessarily, but when the request is made, it gives us some way to say, yeah, we agree, it's reasonable there or not. Certainly, as we plan future projects or future improvements, we can incorporate that into the decision making as well, I would guess, but.
I'm only asking because I'm wondering, like, do we have a rough idea as to how many of these might be there? Because I'm all for these, but if we have
Too many.
75 intersections that score 5 or above, it's gonna get real expensive. real fast.
25K a piece.
Well, and it less meaningful.
Right, yep.
And that's right. That's part of the reason why you don't want to do them everywhere necessarily, but it's hard, I did try to go through, here, I took some example locations where we have them installed, and the best of my ability, I tried to run through the warrants to see, okay, does it score? Does it make sense? And that's why I said I think most locations on higher speed roadways will probably meet warrants, but it's those residential streets where speeds might be slower, where there's no apparent park or playground or trail connection that would add extra points. Those are the ones that probably aren't gonna score highly enough. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there's probably a few enough locations that it wouldn't be overly concerning.
So then the process would be, somebody requests it, you guys score it, it goes to public safety first, and then comes to us.
It could, I don't, actually, that's a good point. The policy doesn't really talk about specifically the steps involved. Essentially how to get it programmed as a project. That could be something we add to the policy, I suppose, to say, okay, this is.
I mean,
the
I'm just
additional
speaking for
steps.
myself.
Yeah,
If there's a possibility of getting a lighted crosswalk in Ward 4, I'm probably going to be in favor of it. So I might caution you to put an extra layer of protection in there.
Not a bad idea.
I think it just, sorry to interrupt, it also depends on if it's part of a larger project.
Yeah.
If it's already in the domain of somebody else,
sure.
if not, it would go straight to public safety.
the other aspect that the council we could do is put a, each year budget so many dollars towards this and say, okay, we have the pot of whatever the number is that's available, and once it's used up for that year, it's used up.
Then we just do it based on score, I assume, right?
Or we do them on score and then spend the money down, and then next year you've got another pot of money potentially.
But what if something traumatic happens and we need to do one?
Well, then that one jumps to the top of the list. But I think that might be the best way to do it, because it could get out of control.
Fast.
Well, I think through the other thing, my concern is then there's over concentration in a specific area. And I think we want to allow, like, we want to look at trying to spread it out across the city where it's warranted. But, looking back, let's say, like, how many were installed over the last couple of years in that spot? And so then there might be an area that hasn't seen a crosswalk in numerous years that maybe really should have an opportunity there. I think that has to be also considered, looked at. Because I get those inquiries all the time. The people on Manchester Road, we had when the Manchester Streetscape project took place, which was back when 2016 or something like that, 2017. We're talking about Fairway. There's actually Ward 7 has the one over by Schnucks. And then there's the one in Ward 8 on Cherry Hills Meadows. I still feel there's a whole section of Manchester Road down by Grover Ridge that has been asking for one. And, I keep mentioning it, but we need to find a way to address that concern. Or I'd love to see how the scoring goes, because I think volume wise there is, and there's other, items there, but. So,
I've got a thought on that we can talk about later.
all right, so let's make sure. And again, that's why with the one that you're talking about,
We all have our
I have
hands.
a
there's a
pot of
project, there is a pot of
project,
money,
there's
but you know you're
project.
spending it, and
Yeah.
that's it. So,
What are we talking about?
so we gotta make sure we have a
Teresa's
motion on the
already
floor, but Teresa, do you have something before we get into a motion?
I do have something I needed to ask Rick about. Is there some, we're talking about the scoring and all. Do we have some of the RRFB guidelines somewhere, the manual of uniform traffic control devices? Does it give us some suggestions or limitations on the concentration or the scoring or measurement tools to decide where these would go?
So largely, based on our research, there's a real lack of warrants in the literature for this kind of thing. There really hasn't been, especially at the local level, much that's been published that we found. So that's why I was really kind of set about putting this together pretty much from scratch. So for what it's worth, that's really what we did. We didn't find anything on the national level really at all relative to warrants for these kind of lights.
Point of order.
Yeah.
We have a motion.
I don't even remember what the motion was.
No, no,
The
we don't have-
motion
We don't
is,
have the motion yet. You were gonna make a motion and then Joe was.
She did.
I thought she did make a
I did
motion.
make a motion, and
What?
Rob seconded it.
well, I was prepared to, but
What's the motion you have on the floor?
So I was asked to split it so that I wasn't out of
Yeah.
order. So the first
That's right.
motion is to proceed with Crestwick's crosswalk and Turnberry to council.
Again, and I would just say to clarify, making sure it's clear, folks, that you're using,
Yes,
The
I'm
budgeted
using the
money.
budgeted money.
That money is
that is for that project.
That's exactly what it's for.
Right.
That's exactly what it's for.
Because I want to have a conversation about the criteria and I have questions about
Yeah.
that, but I want to first
So
get
like, can
that
we
done.
All
call the
right, so-
question on this and then we'll come and then
Well,
I'll.
I
put-
think we are ready to make a motion on that. You got the motion on the floor. So Michelle, you got the motion?
To move forward with budgeted funds for Prestwick's intersection, rapid flashing beacon.
Interim.
The Strecker, yeah, it's the Strecker Road, Strecker project,
And it's already been
Funds.
budgeted.
because I think that'll be important when it goes to council. Otherwise, it's gonna be a bigger discussion of, well, I want one too, and I want one.
Yeah, this is the project
That's
that's been
why.
in line forever that never.
But then that,
We'll never get a sidewalk.
all right,
I
that,
want one.
so that will take care of that. So that motion is on the floor. Michelle, you got who made it?
Mhm.
Lauren, and then second by Rob. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, that motion passes. So now we're either ready to make a second
This is not a
motion
hand up.
or,
Let her hand up for like.
who's got a hand up?
Chris, I have that.
Yeah, I think everyone's got a question, so
All right, just
Yeah.
pick it, Joe.
let's
We'll
go
go.
speed round.
So
Okay, I can make it
You
real
got your
fast.
hand.
motion. on-
Yeah, here, I'll make the comment real quick, and I think I can solve a lot of it. It sounds like everybody has a lot of questions about a lot of different things on this, so I don't think we're in any type of position to vote on what this is right now tonight. So maybe what we do is everybody compile your questions, get them to Rick. Next month, when we circle back, we can have a more educated conversation about what's involved with this and what changes we might recommend. Just my thought, put it out there.
It's going to Board of Public Safety this Thursday as well, so
you
that discussion.
get
We'll have more questions too, so more feedback.
Yep.
All right, Teresa, what would you say?
I just didn't put my hand down.
Oh. Oh, my goodness, they set me up for that one. All right, Rob.
I like where you're at. I just want to commend you for what you've got. I do have a question. I'll send it to you offline if that's the way we go. I want to commend you for the product that you've written.
Yeah, I'm actually ready to approve it, so I,
Hey,
but if
Joe.
you guys have questions. We can send them.
Deborah, you want to see the scores before you vote on?
No. Shouldn't you take these address lists back because?
No, that's.
No, those ones are good.
That's.
But
No, we're
when I-
still, by the way,
But
we're
it's
going
not,
off
is this
topic.
public? Is this public? If somebody
Yeah.
sees it, it's okay.
So before we get on that, let's finish the motion.
So the motion is postpone this until the next meeting.
All right,
Everybody can send questions to Rick and
all
feedback
right,
and whatever.
Nathan and Rob,
And that's the second
that's the second motion.
motion. Okay.
Yes. All right, all those in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstain. All right, that motion passes. So that concludes everything over there. We did have that one item which would require a closed session. So, it could be, something there. I don't want to kick the can down the road too much, but I understand that it's getting late. So,
Can we start the next meeting with that?
Is it time sensitive?
as long as, I think it's important that we are, having that discussion regarding performance with our city administrator. But that's fine, we can postpone that, to the next meeting. All right,
Great.
all right, then a motion to postpone, that item to the next meeting.
So
So
Made by Nathan, seconded by Joe. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstained, okay. That means we have a couple of items under not ready, for future agendas. Miscellaneous, anyone have anything on the miscellaneous? Nathan, oh, yes, you do want to have.
Yes, I do have miscellaneous. I just want to bring Old State back into the conversation because we've been rightfully so with city administrator hiring and waste hauler transitions and stuff, but I think ultimately it kind of more of anything, just communication of kind of re-summarizing where we're at with a bunch of stuff, because I know we've tossed out, I've seen a lot of stuff. And again, not to say any negative, but I've seen stuff, guardrails obviously make no sense, but like just kind of getting another bulleted list of like, we mentioned guardrails, doesn't make sense because of this. We've talked about resurfacing, that doesn't make sense because of this. Here's the other options that we've still kind of looked at, but we haven't gone down the rabbit hole to figure out if it's viable, like. if we could have that even just, either through an email or next meeting or whatever, that just had a summary, said this is where we're at with Old State. And then we can have more of a conversation of what does that look like as far as a city, we would want to consider moving forward with? How much of it is it that's council? I mean, I know we had the truck size signs that we had sent down, apparently, again, since 2019, I know you mentioned we did it once already and sent it to them again. Obviously, the county is not in favor of putting up a truck size limitation on Old State, but just being able to get us back up, back on the radar of what we can and can't do and what we need to take into consideration to have a conversation.
We're planning on reaching out to the county to schedule a meeting with the director. We haven't done that, but I was hopeful to get that done. Answer the next meeting. Maybe that would be part of that report back. Because there was a lot of thoughts. There's two things out there. One is the design build project that the county is doing with MoDOT. So we get more information on that, although I don't expect that to be decided until.
I think when they came to the meeting, they'd mentioned the end of this year or even next year, right? Didn't they say that?
So we can get an update on that. And then the other things that we picked around were potentially addressing the crash history that was identified on the very south end. And where we were leaning was the potential to do a pavement grooving, which I think is what might come out of that design and build project, is a pavement grooving effort to increase the skid resistance. So, if that doesn't come through with the design build, that could be something the city takes an effort to do. We have the opinion that we should be asking potentially for the county to share in that cost, but
I would agree with that opinion, but
same page.
I would say one thing with that too, and I have had a couple residents that have reached out in the midst of this conversation that live on Old State. And as ideas of guardrails and resurfacing stuff have come up, they've been like, please take us into consideration too of like what you change, how that affects our lives. Cause one thing in particular, like, well, if you do all this high friction surfaces, what kind of a noise change is that gonna be? And now are we listening to cars going around this curve all the time? It's like, yeah, it's safer, but we have to listen to it constantly. So again, there's a lot of, I think, different caveats to the conversation. So maybe it is just you do that and maybe just have it as an agenda item on the next meeting, if that's okay with everybody, and we can kind of dig into it a little bit more.
I think that would
Well, I
make
got-
sense. Yeah, that's important. Because there was another car that went off the road in the past week. That road continues to see a recurring issue. Cars going off for whatever reason, or accidents. So it's important that we really get to a point and, unfortunately, the county hasn't been too helpful, so.
Yeah, it'd be great to get to a point where we can either, like, we've figured out what we can do and where that limit is, and we just do whatever as we can do, or we know we just have to continue to fight the county, and we'll continue to work with the county to see what we can figure out, but it'd be nice to kind of keep the process moving forward.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention real quick with council coming up, we do I'll be proposing a resolution for an emergency repair. There for our AC unit, when it went out a couple weeks ago, it's not gonna be cheap. The chiller was completely devoid of the fluid that runs through it. It's a very expensive procedure. We're looking at probably around $22,000 to fix that. Yeah, and they had started working on it after they visited. They did some diagnostics, and I had made a determination at one point to say, hey, it seems like this is probably gonna run us up a bill here, so I stopped them from working. They filled up like 20% of it, and they did do a little bit of work, but the rest of that, they said they're gonna send over a quote and that'll be presented, but with the emergency of it, if it gets hot again, it will fail right now. So just letting you all know that there was really a time to go ahead and get it on the agenda, because I just found out that quote today.
What is it to replace it?
So they are not replacing, but they're sealing it, and they are taking there's this really weird concoction of fluids. It's two different chemicals that has to be slowly pumped into the chiller. On top of that, there's a neutralizing agent at the front of it that it runs through to make sure that it cleans air, things like that. That had to be replaced. The thing is, we moved in 2021 when we were cutting back from COVID. We had our IFS team come out twice a year it was an extra $3,000 a year for them to come out, but you got 2 free days of work. And they would come out and pretty much fix anything they could and also note anything that was starting to deteriorate. We wanted to save a little bit of cash, so we did move back on that. And then we did the 24/7, online customer service kind of thing. And they hadn't been coming out. We've been trying to use a different laborer, and they came out from this visit that I said, obviously AC was out here. And they noticed some significant damage. So there's, it's something that we're gonna have to budget for over the next couple of years.
All right, more to come on that. Joe,
Yep.
motion adjourned?
In 1 second, I did a couple quick things. One, can you put a list together of all of the dumb things that we decided to stop paying for that are now costing us an absolute fortune? That would be great. 2, can we get a price on, I don't know how else to describe this, but like the little lights that they have for the women of League voters, when we do the conversation in there, it's like a red, yellow and green, so that when we have people speaking, there's not a debate as to how much time they have left or just a clock.
Oh,
There's one around.
Oh, there was a big,
They can show them
big
it's a
discussion over that, was not.
It's probably over there in the podium.
Whatever, even if it's just a clock that sits facing them so that they can see what it is, because
So they know we can trust our
I mean, I
numbers too.
think Sam was
Do you remember that, Joe?
Yes. I do.
and then the last thing, which is much less important before the motions, Rick, I don't know if you will know this answer. I think it's American Water is reworking on the water main on West Glen Farms. And they took a pretty good chunk of the road out and put 2 giant plates in the road, which I'm hoping are very temporary, because every time someone goes down the very well-traveled road, it's like a gong going off throughout the neighborhood.
That's Rick's new type of pavement.
Yeah, right.
Servicing material, you're gonna see that a lot more in the city.
Let's get put steel plates everywhere.
Do you
don't
have
run as fast as
an
asphalt.
estimate how long that's gonna be like that?
Yeah, but you didn't know.
We can try to check. I'm pretty sure that is the permit to repair the pavement that was damaged when the,
Yeah, well,
That's
what
it.
they fixed before was definitely sinking in, but
Yeah.
what they took out is quite
Is
large.
that the one at Thunderhead Canyon over there,
Yeah.
right? Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, so they put the plates in today and I was like, what is that? And I walked over there and sure enough, it's just 2 giant metal rattling plates every time all
He's gonna
9,000
be,
cars drive by.
You may not get good sleep tonight.
Probably not. So, and that, if nobody has anything else, I'm happy to make a motion to adjourn.
One last thing. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I just had a couple residents say again, they were pleased by the results from the speed study. However, when walking upon lack of sidewalk, cars feel faster. So they've just asked for increased police presence. They see areas like Clarkson Valley that's a speed trap and they're going, why can't we be a speed trap too? And just become known for having somebody that gets speeders. But, doable. It's doable and on state.
Well, north part.
Yeah.
All right.
Problem is the south part that's the biggest concern. There's nowhere to pull anybody over.
Anything
Have to be at
else?
the-
I was just gonna add,
Oh, you did.
yeah, I was just gonna add that during our next meeting, you asked about a list of issues with the building.
Mhm.
I think it might be sufficient. It might be a good idea for this committee to just take a tour with me and Rick around the building, and I can show you all the issues because the building's gonna need significant TLC and we only put $20,000 towards its maintenance this year. And it's just, I'll be honest with you, it's not enough. And right now, the building's got some very significant issues moving
I
forward.
think his office is about to fall into the road.
There is separation, it's settling, there's the ponding here that they decided to do. That's probably led to a lot of this. If you listen to the sewer out front, it's constantly, you can constantly hear running water. There is 2 significant leaks, windows are gonna need to be taken out. There's a lot, but I'd love to, and I'd be more than happy to walk you through each and every item because I don't want the sticker shock to come to you whenever we start getting, well, we have quotes on some of it, but and Rick had proposed this to me. And we've already had a quote for this, was to have a structural engineer just go through it and make a priority list for us. So we might need to do that. And one thing I might be making an action on here quickly is cleaning our roof because it'll cost about 5,000, but it looks, if you notice it from 100, it's a little rough. And if we're gonna talk about code enforcement, we need to follow our own code.
Right.
That's it.
All right. Motion adjourned. No. Right, who's seconding? Tracy, yeah, you haven't had a motion tonight. so-
I know, because you can't see me. I'm sorry.
All right,
No, not.
so all right, you get it for tonight. Hey, it's not debatable. All right, all in favor, please say aye.